Chapter 350. The beautiful snake Parisa, who fought with Ron, turned into her human form and sat among the crowd. She looked like an inconspicuous human child. She was quietly watching the battle in the arena. She was not surprised that the human had summoned the Dread Knight. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly. Nappa, let me. Show me your true strength. Nappa did not dare to underestimate the powerful Dread Knight. He growled and his eyes flashed. Unknowingly, he raised his poison element to its peak. This was not Nappa's intention. It was a natural ability to face a powerful enemy. It was also a form of adjustment. At this time, the Dread Knight moved. It charged forward with a powerful aura. Its body was burning with flames. Its 4 iron hooves stomped on the cold ground, making a loud noise. Poison mist. Nappa did not back down. He bravely faced the Dread Knight and spat out a mouthful of poison mist. The poison mist enveloped the Dread Knight and began to corrode it. White smoke rose from the Dread Knight's body and made a hissing sound. Some white liquid flowed down the thick armor and splashed on the ground. A large hole was corroded in the hard limestone ground. Seeing this, Ron could not help but worry. He had experienced the power of Nappa's poison. If even the Dread Knight could not withstand it, he had no choice but to surrender. Duh! A simple sound came from the Dread Knight's throat. Then, a large amount of flames appeared on its body and melted all the poison mist. How is this possible? Nappa's eyes showed a trace of shock. Nothing happened to it? Impossible! Nappa clenched his teeth and cast a series of poison spells. However, they were all easily neutralized by the Dread Knight. In fact, the Dread Knight was slightly injured by Nappa's poison spells. However, the injuries were not severe. It had the ability to heal itself. It was too late. The Dread Knight had already rushed to Nappa. It raised its huge sword and slashed down at Nappa's lion head. Nappa could not dodge in time. He let out a scream. Blood splattered everywhere. There was a large wound from his forehead to his neck. Blood flowed down his face. High-level magical beasts usually had strong bodies. This was already a strong defense. The poison manticore lion was one of the best of the magical beasts. Its skin was so tough that normal weapons could not penetrate it. But under the Dread Knight's powerful attack, its tough skin was as thin as paper. Damn it! After being disfigured by the Terror Knight, Nappa flew into a rage out of humiliation. He roared and retaliated. Its huge body pounced on the Terror Knight, engaging in close-range combat. Boom! 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 The 2 gigantic figures continued to tangle with each other, causing a large cloud of dust to rise. Waves of angry roars could be heard from the Colosseum. Nappa's eyes were bloodshot as he pounced on the Terror Knight, biting and tearing. The Terror Knight also waved his saber and fought back. This is a fierce battle. Both sides are going all out. It's really hard to tell who's going to win this battle. This kind of battle is more exciting. In the audience, everyone's faces were filled with shock. Whether it was humans or beastmen, they were all shouting crazily. They weren't cheering for anyone, but everyone's faces were filled with excitement. The atmosphere in the arena was at its peak. It was undeniable that no matter who won this battle, it would be recorded in the history book. Nappa was at a complete disadvantage against the Terror Knight. In terms of close combat ability, the venomous Manticore clan was strong, but they were no match for the heavily armored and fully armed Terror Knight. Even though he was howling in pain, the pride of the venomous Manticore clan did not allow him to take a single step back. Ron was hiding on the other side of the field. His eyes flickered, but his face was filled with pain. His soul was burning and full of suffering. At this moment, Ron seemed to be able to hear his soul wailing in his ears. Damn it, why is this guy so difficult to deal with? At this moment, Ron was burning with anxiety. If the battle dragged on, the situation would most likely be disadvantageous to him. Using soul ignition was a huge burden on his soul. If he could not win, he would be the one to fall. After an unknown amount of time, boom, The two huge figures separated quickly, each going in a different direction. This round of battle was considered to have come to an end. Huff, huff, Nappa was panting heavily. His huge lion's nose was twitching. At this moment, his body was covered with terrifying wounds, and blood was constantly flowing out. This guy is not simple. Nappa's bloodshot eyes stared at the Dread Knight, like a wounded beast. The Dread Knight's body was also covered with large wounds. One of the wounds extended from its chest to its waist. If it was a normal person, they would have died by now. However, it did not affect undead creatures at all. Nappa fell into the same mistake as the others. It was not worth it at all. In a situation where their strength was about the same, the Dread Knight was only injured by undead creatures. However, the pain on his body was very clear. This was the horror of necromancy. Damn it, it's not worth it to fight these undead creatures. I have to get rid of that summoner. Nappa tried his best to stay awake. At this moment, his gaze fell on Ron. He saw that Ron was far away, remotely controlling the Dread Knight. Nappa's eyes were filled with helplessness as he looked at Ron. This guy was as slippery as a fish. If he attacked, he would most likely turn into a cloud of smoke and dodge. Moreover, his opponent, the powerful Dread Knight, was like a wall in front of him. Unless he defeated it, Nappa had no chance of attacking Ron. This can't go on. How can I attack him? Nappa fell into deep thought. Go. Kill him for me, Ron gritted his teeth. He was using soul ignition. If he wanted to stall for time, he would definitely be the one. Tong Ling waved the bone staff in his hand, desperately urging the power of his soul. The Dread Knight charged. As if he didn't see the Dread Knight, Nappa stared fixedly at Ron. At this moment, an idea flashed through his mind. I've got it. Nappa clenched his teeth, his eyes darkening. I can only use that move, but I'm afraid I'll have to pay a price. Chance. Looking at the slope as if he was in a daze, Ron didn't know why, but he still commanded the Terror Knights to launch their strongest attack. Dread Strike. The Dread Knight raised its huge sword. Large amounts of flames erupted from its body as it slashed down with its sword. Boom! A loud sound rang out. The huge saber slashed at Nappa. Just as Ron was feeling excited about this, the huge scorpion tail behind Nappa suddenly stood up high. The tail hook suddenly opened, and a trace of a black shadow suddenly shot out. Poison Needle. This wasn't Nappa's poison magic. It was a life-saving skill unique to the venomous Manticore clan. This poison needle was about 5 centimeters long and extremely thin. Once it was shot out, it would take 9 months for another needle to grow. Although the needle was poisonous, it was extremely powerful. It could be called the venomous Manticore lion's life-saving skill. Even a giant dragon could only run away after being hit by this needle. It wouldn't dare to fight the venomous Manticore lion anymore. This showed how powerful the needle was. The needle flew at an extremely fast speed. It only left a faint trace in the air, and there was no sound of it piercing through the air. Ron didn't expect Nappa to suddenly attack him. By the time he reacted, it was already too late for him to use the Shadowmas spell to escape. Bang! The needle pierced his chest. Ron was shocked. The venomous Manticore lion was covered in poison. He didn't dare to be careless. He quickly pulled out the needle and threw it on the ground. The needle was extremely thin, and looked like it was pornographic under the sunlight. It didn't give off any light. It was just an ordinary needle on the ground. He carefully examined the wound that had been pierced by the needle. The wound was extremely thin, and a little bit of blood was oozing out. Seeing that the blood was not abnormal, Ron was relieved. As for the wound that had been pierced by the needle, it was not a problem at all. It seemed that the needle had been pulled out in time, and there weren't any consequences. Ron rejoiced. The Terror Knight's heavy attack had heavily injured Nappa. Even with the venomous Manticore lion's strong body, it wasn't easy for him to take the blow. Blood flowed out of his mouth, and he couldn't get up for a long time. Admit defeat. You don't have any more chances. Ron took a deep breath and walked towards Nappa, who was lying on the ground heavily injured. His eyes shone with a cold light. Ha, 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 Nappa laughed bitterly. Blood continued to flow out of his mouth. He was half sprawled on the ground, looking at Ron with eyes full of mockery. You're the one who lost. You think you'll be fine after pulling out the needle? If it was so simple, why would that needle be called the life-saving skill of the venomous Manticore clan? What? Hearing Nappa's words, Ron frowned. He had a bad feeling because at this moment, he was starting to feel that something wasn't right. Threads of something black, like poison, seeped into Ron's body. They gradually spread out, forming thousands of black threads. These threads flowed up his blood and actually entered his mind. The mind was the source of all things, and also the location of the soul. At this moment, Ron suddenly understood. In the next moment, his face was filled with fear. This needle didn't have any poison. Or rather, this so-called poison didn't attack his body, but his soul. Countless black threads intertwined like invisible hands, attacking Ron's soul. This was the venomous Manticore clan's life-saving skill, the venomous needle. The poison that attacked the body was too common. Only the poison that attacked the soul was difficult to defend against. At this moment, Ron was panicking. His soul was extremely strong. If it was any other time, he wouldn't be afraid of a mere soul attack. However, at this moment, his soul was extremely weak after using soul ignition. Pain, intense pain. Chapter 351. What's wrong with him? What's wrong with this human? At this moment, the audience started to get up. Their eyes were filled with shock. The situation had taken a turn for the worse, and they could not understand it. Everyone, please familiarize yourselves with the domain name. Ron, Emolan panicked and lost her composure. She quickly walked to the railing and shouted loudly. Then she turned her head and asked anxiously, Grandpa, Ron, what happened? Li Jia shook his head and sighed. Come, Ron has already lost. If I'm not wrong, that poison scorpion lion had used their tribe's trump card, Poison Needle. Poison Needle. Morin panicked. Then what will happen to Ron? Will he die? I don't know. Li Jia shook his head. Rumor has it that the poisonous needles of the Poison Manticore clan are extremely powerful, and there is no antidote in the entire continent. Even if one's body is as strong as a giant dragon's, if one is pierced by the poisonous needle of a poison manticore lion, one would have to immediately escape and find a place to expel the poison. Sarah took a deep breath. The poison scorpion lion's poison needle is so powerful. If this is the case, Ron is bound to lose. Li Jia's voice sank. I'm afraid it's not just a loss. Morin's face turned pale when she heard that. She understood what Li Jia meant. The rules of the tournament were to surrender or die. There was no other choice. But with Ron's current condition, could he still say surrender? There was no chance. Ron's consciousness began to slowly sink into dizziness, and his body slowly fell to the ground. Ha! Ha ha! A victorious smile finally appeared on Napo's face. He gritted his teeth, wriggled his huge body, and suddenly stood up. Ha ha! Human, you are indeed strong. But it's a pity that you're dead. No one can wake up from my poison. Napa laughed sinisterly. Let me end your life. With that, he struggled to crawl towards the place where Ron had fallen. Not far away, the Terror Knight stood there in a daze like a stone statue, ignoring Napo's actions. At this moment, its green eyes under the cold mask lit up for a moment. Then, its body turned into mist and disappeared into the air. The Terror Knight had disappeared. There was nothing that could stop Napo's actions. Napo's face became even brighter. His smile had a hint of savagery. Suddenly, Napo's legs went soft, and his huge body fell heavily to the ground. With a boom sound, a large cloud of smoke and dust rose. Damn it! Nappa climbed up with difficulty and cursed fiercely. Only then did he realize that the injuries on his body were more serious than he had imagined. The Terror Knight's attack was so powerful. Nappa clenched his teeth and flapped his huge wings, bringing with them a slight breeze. His huge body rose up once again and swayed as he walked towards the fallen Ron. At this moment, his eyes were filled with a strong killing intent. There was no need to go through so much trouble to kill Ron. With Nappa's strength, he only needed to release a poison mist or poison bomb, and it would be enough to kill the immobile Ron on the ground. It was not that Nappa did not want to, but he could not. This involved the Poison Manticore clan's greatest secret. The poison needle was the source of the Poison Manticore clan's poison elemental energy. Once the needle was out, it meant that they had temporarily lost their poison elemental energy. They could only use their robes until a new needle grew out 9 months later. If Nappa wanted to kill Ron, he had to get close and do it himself. The situation had taken a turn for the worse. On one side was a heavily injured magical beast that could barely move. On the other side was an unconscious human on the ground. The outcome of the competition had already been decided. Kill him. It was unknown who said this from the spectator seats, but it seemed to have brought about a storm. The entire gladiator arena was in an uproar. Kill him! Kill this human! Kill him! The audience began to move, especially the beastmen. The bloody scene that was about to happen seemed to have ignited a fire in their hearts. As if they had been injected with blood, they began to shout crazily. Kill him! Kill him! Countless voices converged into a sea. At this moment, the atmosphere in the arena had reached its peak, worshipping the strong and despising the weak. This was the consensus of the entire continent. At this moment, no one was interested in looking at the previously awe-inspiring but now unconscious Ron. Except for Morin. "Uncle Sala, I beg you. Let Ron surrender?" Morin cried and begged. "Our Thorny Flower tribe surrenders. We don't want to fight anymore, we don't even want the second place, right?" Sala looked at Morin with sympathy in his eyes. He sighed. "I'm sorry, niece Morin. Even if I am the Beast King, I have no right to stop the competition. The rules of the Young Strongest tournament must be followed. It's not impossible to surrender, but it must be done by the contestant himself. Even if it's the contestant's father or wife, the tournament will not accept it. If anyone can surrender on behalf of the contestant, then the rules of the competition will be broken." When Emolan heard this, she seemed to have gone silly and collapsed on the chair. Li Jia sighed as he looked at Morin. There was nothing he could do. Forcefully changing the rules and stopping the competition will damage the Beastman Empire's reputation. Li Jia and Sala are the same. They are people who care about the big picture. Under such circumstances, they will not do such a thing. Nappa dragged his heavily injured body to Ron's side. Ron is lying on the ground, clutching his head. Even though he is unconscious, he still has a pained expression on his face. Nappa looked at the defenseless Ron and took a deep breath. "I can't help it. Your undead magic is indeed powerful. You can actually push me to this extent. It's a pity that you are going to die. Not many magical beasts can withstand my poison needles, let alone a weak human like you." He raised his huge claws up high, and a sinister smile appeared on his face. "Let me send you on your way." Then, he slammed his huge claws down. In Ron's mind, his soul is struggling to break free from the black threads. It's a pity that it's futile. The black threads are binding his soul tighter and tighter. He can't breathe. Damn it. Is there no other way? Ron's face is filled with anger. This expression is directly expressed on his soul. Unfortunately, cursing is useless. The black threads are starting to invade his soul. When his soul is completely invaded, it will be when his soul dies. Without a soul, Ron is like a walking corpse. Even if he is alive, it is no different from being dead. Soul poison is indeed the life-saving skill of the Poison Manticore clan. There is no antidote to the soul poison because it is not a poison to begin with. It is a type of soul attack. Just as Ron is in despair, the whirlpool in the soul world suddenly changed. A ray of green light descended from the sky and landed on Ron's soul. At this moment, a miracle happened. The moment the black threads came into contact with the green light, they melted like snow, dissolving by more than half. The black threads are afraid. They keep shrinking, trying to avoid the terrifying green light. However, the green light seems to have a mind of its own. It keeps chasing after and driving away the black threads, devouring them. What's going on? At this moment, Ron is surprised and happy. He, who escaped death, is filled with gratitude for the green light. If it came a moment later, it would be useless even if it dispels the black thread. The black threads keep escaping. They no longer have the strength to invade Ron's soul. However, the green light does not intend to let them go. In the end, it devours the green threads completely. Phew, Ron heaved a long sigh of relief. He smiled at the green light. Thank you. As soon as his voice fell, the green light suddenly changed. It shone brightly. In an instant, the entire sea of knowledge became bright. In Ron's eyes, a terrifying scene appeared. The green light slowly became bigger and turned into a green ball. It floated in his sea of knowledge like a green sun. To Ron's horror, the huge green ball seems to have a strong suction force. His soul involuntarily rose and was sucked in by the green ball. No! Ron's face was filled with fear as he tried his best to resist the suction of the green ball. Unfortunately, his entire soul was being devoured by the green ball. What is this place? At this time, Ron opened his eyes. What he saw was darkness, endless darkness. This kind of darkness makes people feel very lonely. If he stays here for a year, Ron might go crazy. After an unknown amount of time, Ron only heard a crash sound, as if something had been broken. Countless memory fragments were scattered and then reassembled. A ray of light shone on Ron's face. He suddenly came from a dark world to a bright place. Ron felt that the light was too dazzling. He used his hand to block his eyes. Pornographic novel. But when he opened his eyes, he was shocked. Mountains of corpses, seas of blood, and countless skeletons charging. He seemed to have come to a dream world. With all this, Ron knew that these things were all illusions. Suddenly, his eyes widened in disbelief. The entire mountain was densely packed with skeletons. The number of skeletons made him speechless. He was high up on the mountain. Looking down, he could not see the end. There were at least hundreds of millions of skeletons. In addition to the skeletons, Ron found many powerful undead creatures. Black Knights and Terror Knights suddenly appeared among them. They were like the low-level skeletons, slowly moving forward. In addition, Ron also found some moving corpses. These corpses were different from the zombies he refined. They moved slowly, had dull eyes, and held simple weapons in their hands. It was as if they were listening to someone's summons. Among the zombies, there were also some huge and ugly creatures. Those creatures were like huge lumps of flesh. Some had 2 heads, some had 3, and all of them looked ferocious. One of them was like a human hand, incomparably thick, while the other hand was like a hook. Behind their backs there were also a few other arms. No one knew what they were for, but their huge abdomens were open, revealing eerie white teeth. Chapter 352. Those things seemed to have a purpose, and they were all rushing towards one place. Ron sucked in a breath of cold air. Looking at the daunting numbers, no one would think that they could stop this invincible undead army. What a spectacular and terrifying undead army, but where is their destination? Ron felt strange, and he decided to go and see what was going on. It was not the first time that Ron had entered that illusion, and he was familiar with it. At least, he was not afraid now. However, Ron still did not understand why these things would appear in his dream. It was as if there was a pair of invisible hands controlling everything, allowing him to see these things clearly as a bystander. With a thought, his body and soul form floated up like a wisp of smoke and flew straight ahead. He did not know how long he had flown, but in front of him was still the vast undead army. It could be seen how terrifying their numbers were. Not long after, a ferocious killing intent surged out, mixed with the stench of blood. About 10 kilometers ahead, it was the battlefield of two armies. Seeing this scene, Ron was shocked. The mighty skeleton legion was actually blocked by someone. Blocking the path of the skeleton corps was another army. Their numbers weren't small, at least a few million people. Each and every one of them was a very powerful warrior. They were wearing thick armor with profound runes engraved on it. They held heavy weapons in their hands, giving off an imposing aura. Their numbers were several times smaller than the skeleton corps, but the difference was that these warriors were all elite. Dozens of skeleton warriors could not even get close to them. The powerful elite warriors formed an army that blocked the path of the skeleton corps. Who are they? Looking at the facial features of these warriors, Ron had a trace of doubt in his heart. These powerful warriors in front of him were clearly not humans, beastmen, or elves. They were a race that he had never seen before. These soldiers all had tense, expressionless faces. Their skin was as white as a soft light. They were tall, with well-defined muscles, and exuded a holy aura. Ron frowned. Why? They give me a very special feeling, like. Although Ron did not say it out loud, his heart was clear. That's right, seeing this unknown race gave Ron a feeling. They were the Holy See. Regardless of appearance or temperament, these warriors in front of him were very similar to the Holy See. They were exactly the same as the Church's warriors. Could this be a war between the Holy See and the Scourge Church? Ron's heart skipped a beat. He did not know why, but he suddenly had such a thought. This thought made him go down. The war between the two sides was very cruel. A Holy Knight's sword flashed and split a Dark Knight in half. Following that, a ghoul pounced on the Holy Knight and bit him. The Holy Knight cried out in pain and fell to the ground. Following that, countless ghouls pounced on him and tore him into pieces and swallowed him. The war continued. The entire battlefield became a meat grinder. In the middle of the battlefield, lives were constantly being lost. Roar! In the distance, there was an earth-shaking roar. Following that, an extremely cold aura spread out and covered the entire sky. It's a frost dragon. Ron was shocked. He could not forget that pair of terrifying eyes. That was not all. Dozens of powerful frost dragons appeared in the sky. They emitted a terrifying aura and slowly rushed over. Ron was stunned. The size of the frost dragons' bodies was far beyond his imagination. They were dozens of meters long. Compared to the wyverns Ron had seen, they couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. As soon as these frost dragons arrived on the battlefield, the balance of the battlefield changed drastically. Powerful and cold dragon breath spurted out, and the divine obscene novel on the ground the secret race warrior turned into a block of ice. Before the ice melted, his entire body turned into ashes. Powerful. Too powerful, Ron's heart almost jumped out of his body. Boom! At this moment, there was a loud sound in the distance. From the sound, it must have come from very far away. Whoosh! A strong gust of wind blew toward Ron, almost making him lose his balance. Not only that, but this gust of wind also carried an aura that made one's heart tremble. At this moment, Ron's heart almost stopped beating. What is this? This aura? Ron's face revealed a look of lingering fear. That terrifying aura was so powerful that it was suffocating. However, to Ron, this terrifying aura carried a familiar feeling. Ron stared blankly into the distance. Dark clouds were gathering in the distance like a ferocious beast from ancient times. It made people stop in their tracks just by looking at it. Forget it, let's go. Ron gritted his teeth and made up his mind. No matter what danger there was in front of him, he would not back down. He slowly flew forward, but Ron felt his body trembling. It was a trembling due to fear. It was as if there was a powerful beast waiting for him in front. Not long after, a powerful figure appeared in front of Ron's eyes. That's right, it was this figure emitting a powerful aura that made people feel suffocated. This person was floating in the air, exuding a strange and powerful aura from head to toe. This person was wearing a black robe with two huge pauldrons on both sides of his shoulders. A huge skull was engraved on the pauldrons, occupying half of his body. He held a long staff in his hand. At the top of the staff was the skull of a goat-like creature. Its hollowed-out eyes exuded a demonic power, and there were 4 long bone horns on its head. The black-robed person's back was facing him, so Ron could not see his face clearly. He could only see his tall back. The black robe was slowly fluttering behind him. In front of the black-robed person was another person. This person was the same as the mysterious race Ron had seen before. He had white skin, blue eyes, and golden hair. He looked a bit like a human, but he was not. But when it came to this person, Ron was shocked. This is the legendary angel. Ron grew up in the Holy Roman Empire and had been influenced by the Holy See. That's right, this unknown expert in front of him was exactly the same as the angel in the Holy See's murals. The difference was that the angel in the murals had 2 wings, but this angel had 4 ridiculously large wings on his back. They were gently flapping. Above his head, a beautiful circle of light was floating, constantly emitting a holy power that made Ron feel uncomfortable. Although he could not see that person's expression, Ron could feel that he was sneering. The 2 of them were confronting each other. Perhaps they had already gone through a decent battle. Their clothes and armors were somewhat damaged. The 2 of them quietly stood in the sky, emitting a powerful aura like a mountain. This kind of aura was extremely powerful, and Ron had never felt it from anyone before. It gave him the feeling that the strength of these 2 people had exceeded the limits of human imagination. In front of them, the so-called experts of the sacred domain were just a joke. Although he was puzzled, Ron could still figure out something. If he guessed correctly, the undead army was the black-robed man's subordinate. Similarly, they all used soul power. On the other side, those unknown warriors were the subordinates of the 4-winged man. Whether it was their race or their expressions, they were completely the same, and the power they used was also the same. At this moment, Ron could not help but take a deep breath, and a trace of confusion appeared in his eyes. Who are they? Why do they have such powerful strength? At this time, the 4-winged angel slowly said, "I didn't expect you to come. It's really beyond my expectations." The black-robed man snorted, not to be outdone, and said, "Same to you. Aren't you also here?" The angel's face sank, and a trace of displeasure flashed across his face. Then, his lips curved into a smile. "You're very strong, stronger than many of the experts I've met," he smiled, and a trace of ridicule appeared in his eyes. "But how should I address you?" "Hermes, or the commander of the Undead Plains Scourge Army, Lord Lich King?" "What? Lich King?" Hearing this, Ron's expression froze. His eyes widened, and an intense look of disbelief flashed across his eyes. He stared blankly at the tall and sturdy figure in front of him. He was the Lich King? At this time, the black-robed man's figure paused. He turned around in surprise, and his gaze met with Ron's. Boom! Ron's body stiffened as if he had been struck by lightning. What entered his eyes was an extremely ferocious face. It looked like a skeleton, and its deep eye sockets were emitting a strange green energy that was constantly emanating from it. This was a race that Ron had never seen before, but for some reason, perhaps because they both had soul energy, Ron felt a sense of familiarity. What's going on? It's like something is spying on us, but I can't find anything. The Lich King Hermes paused, and an unnatural expression flashed across his face, but he quickly returned to normal. He smiled and said, "Archangel Michael of the Legion of Holy Angels from the Order Plane. I've heard of you for a long time. Chapter 353. The two of them stared at each other in the air. Their auras continued to rise, and the powerful divine power emanating from their bodies seemed to distort the space around them. Ron was completely shocked by the conversation between the two of them. He stood there in a daze, unable to speak for a long time. Ron sucked in a breath of cold air. Lich King. So he's the Lich King, the legendary Lich King who founded the Scourge Church. As expected. He's terrifying. He stared blankly at the vast land below him. The slaughter on the ground had not stopped at all. Countless undead rushed forward dauntlessly. On the vast battlefield, there were dilapidated walls everywhere, and he could vaguely make out the shape of a city. However, everything had been destroyed in the war. Ron's eyes suddenly widened. Lich King. Scourge Church. 100,000 years ago. Then this is, Ron's heart couldn't help but thump, and his eyes were filled with shock. At this point, the answer was obvious. That's right, this was Amros, the Amros of 100,000 years ago. It was also Homeland's grandfather's hometown, but why would Homeland's grandfather's hometown become like this? What happened to the Amros of 100,000 years ago? How was it related to the current Noah continent? Ron's heart was filled with questions. Slightly raising his head, Ron looked at the tall Lich King in front of him. He saw his long black hair fluttering in the wind, and his body was covered in black soul energy. No. This isn't soul energy. Ron's eyes narrowed as he cried out in shock. This is the divine power of death. This power gave Ron a very familiar feeling. Other than the fact that they were of the same origin, there was also one thing that was similar to the green power that overflowed from the soul ring. It was the divine power of death that surpassed everything in the world. The Lich King was a legendary god. Looking at the Lich King, Ron's eyes blazed. At the same time, he felt a trace of respect from the bottom of his heart. Looking at the Lich King, he felt that he was so insignificant. To him, a god was an existence that was like looking up to a mountain. Today, he had finally seen a god with his own eyes. How could he not be moved? So this is what a god looks like. Do gods really exist? Ron let out a sigh of relief, and his gaze fell on the four-winged angel facing the Lich King. This guy called Michael looks like a god like Sir Lich King. His power is different from Sir Lich King's, but he's also very powerful. Ron tilted his head and silently sized up this guy called Michael. He felt that this angel had a special connection with the Holy See. Looking down at the fierce battle below, the Lich King sighed. Omroth, this is also my second home. I didn't think it would become such a desperate battlefield. The Lich King raised his head and looked at Michael. His expression sank. Lord Michael, I think that the reason the Holy See was able to defeat the Scourge Church was because of your legion of holy angels, right? The four-winged angel Michael smiled, but didn't reply. Not only that, but you also personally sent a large number of two-winged angels from the lower realms to destroy the Scourge Church. Speaking up to here, the Lich King's facial muscles twitched, and a trace of intense anger appeared on his face. He also raised his voice. This has already violated the agreement between the various large factions and broken the balance between them. Lord Michael, is everything that has happened today the result you wanted? Heh, so what? Michael laughed coldly. Her Highness, let's not talk about each other anymore. Didn't you also bring the Scourge to this subplane? Let me remind you. You have also violated the agreement. Looking at the Lich King, who appeared calm on the surface but was inwardly furious on the inside, Michael's lips curled up. He decided to further provoke this arrogant fellow. Here, I can't help but praise someone. That person is the representative of our legion of holy angels in this subplane. Did you know? After the battle, he actually gave the order to kill all of the undead believers in this subplane, carrying out a thorough cleansing. How happy am I to see you filthy undead believers fall under the butcher's knife of justice. Not only that, he also destroyed all books related to undead magic, training pens, as well as anything related to the Scourge Church. Heh, this is simply destroying the roots of the Scourge Church. From now on, you undead have already disappeared from this subplane. Not bad, I'll definitely reward him later. Michael said with a smile. He looked at the Lich King with a mocking gaze. After hearing these words, the furious Lich King calmed down and smiled. The person you're talking about is this guy? Saying this, he opened his mouth and a white mist was exhaled from his mouth. It slowly condensed into a human figure and was grabbed by the Lich King. Ron's eyes were sharp and immediately saw that it was the soul of a white-haired old man. However, why did this soul look so familiar? It's him? Ron remembered and opened his eyes wide in shock. At this moment, the four-winged angel Michael was also stunned. He was shocked. Antonio, how could it be you? That person was the first pope of the Holy See, Antonio, who had already become a holy knight. At this moment, his physical body had already been destroyed and he could only exist in this world as a soul. However, the Lich King didn't plan on letting him go. He would rather die than be tortured. This was a piece of cake for the Lich King who focused on cultivating the soul. When Antonio's soul reached Michael, it was as if he had found a life-saving straw. He crazily yelled, Lord Michael, I beg you, save me. Antonio was Michael's representative in this subplane, Omlos, and was greatly valued by him. Now that this person had fallen into the Lich King's hands, it made him lose face. With Michael's arrogant personality, even if Antonio was a dog, he was still Michael's dog. Anyone who wanted to touch Antonio would have to go through him first. Seeing this, Michael's expression darkened. He stared at the Lich King and said, When did he fall into your hands? Before your legion of holy angels arrived. The Lich King slightly smiled and glanced at Antonio. This guy's talent in cultivating your Guangming's law is pretty good. In this subplane, his strength has reached the level of a demigod. The Lich King casually praised and said at the same time, After I killed him, I extracted his soul from his body and placed him in the soul purgatory. I didn't even need to interrogate him. This guy took the initiative to do everything. He glanced at Michael, smiled, and said, including how he killed all the undead believers in Omros. Antonio heard a dirty novel. At this moment, he started to shout crazily, Lord Michael, save me. You told me to do all this. I've made great meritorious deeds for you. You have to save me, Antonio said with snot and tears. He was locked up in a place called the Soul Purgatory by the Lich King and was tortured. If he could die, he would die without hesitation. Unfortunately, he couldn't die even if he wanted to in his soul form. This feeling of being better off dead made him collapse. Michael didn't think that Antonio would reveal this secret in front of everyone. His face turned green and white. Although this matter didn't affect him much, he couldn't show his face in front of the Lich King. Michael flew into a rage out of humiliation. Mouth, you useless thing. You betrayed God's will. Die. After that, he waved his hand and a beam of white light flew out, slamming into Antonio's soul. Antonio's soul screamed and disappeared from the world. His body and soul were destroyed. As his soul disappeared, Antonio's furious expression appeared in the fog. Even in death, he didn't think that he, who was so loyal to Michael and listened to everything he said, would die at his hands in the end. A person who is a dog will be betrayed by their master sooner or later. Ron sighed inwardly as he thought to himself, to think that a god was behind the destruction of the Calamity Church 100,000 years ago. This is truly inconceivable. The performance is over. After a moment of silence, the Lich King slowly said, So, you admit that you were the one who ordered all of this behind the scenes? Ha ha. So what if I was? Michael laughed wildly. Hermes, you're too stupid to ask this question. Our strength is about the same. Even if I did it, what can you do to me? The muscles on the Lich King's face continuously trembled. His black hair fluttered behind his head, and his black robe fluttered even though there was no wind. It could be seen that he was suppressing an intense anger in his heart. Michael. The Lich King slowly raised his head. His black eye sockets that looked like a skeleton warrior emitted an intense green light. He said word by word, "Go die. You want to kill me? It won't be that easy." Michael roared, and an intense white light exploded from his body. This was the boundless divine power of Guangming. It continuously revolved around him, and a powerful battle intent appeared on his face. "Hermes, since you've come here, I'll completely bury you and your scourge." As he spoke, a long spear appeared in his hand. With a wave of his hand, a white pillar of light shot into the sky. Angel's Gate. A large hole appeared in the sky, and traces of Guangming's divine power continuously revolved, forming a gigantic energy vortex. Not long after, countless two-winged angels flew out from the spatial vortex and met the Lich King head-on. The Lich King coldly harumphed. Several hundred frost dragons appeared from the horizon, bringing with them an intense aura of ice as they roared and flew behind him. Boom! 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 The great battle began. The powerful army that descended from the mortal plane brought a great disaster to the Amros continent. At this moment, the Lich King, Hermes, and the four-winged angel, Michael, also began to fight. The battle between the two gods was extraordinary. Powerful energy spread out, and the entire sky became dark. Space twisted, and lightning as thick as buckets shot everywhere like snakes. Under the influence of the powerful energy, countless volcanoes erupted at the same time. Ash filled the sky, and cities were destroyed. Rivers dried up, mountains were flattened, and it was as if the end of the world had come. The entire Amros continent looked like hell. Chapter 354. The sky was burning, the earth was crumbling, and the scene of Amos was like the end of the world. Two balls of light, one black and one white, rose into the sky like two suns, sending down rays of light that destroyed everything in their path. This is too powerful. At this moment, Ron was dumbstruck. The destructive power of the battle between two gods was far beyond his imagination. At this moment, Ron frowned as he felt a sharp pain in his head. That is. His pupils suddenly widened as Ron's face was filled with disbelief. At this moment, he was about to break through. In Ron's world of consciousness, soul force was constantly churning like seawater, and his soul was constantly flying and twisting. Ron's soul face, which was floating in the air, showed a look of pain. Ron clutched his head, the veins on his thin face bulging. It could be seen that he was enduring great pain. His soul force continued to rise and expand until it reached a terrifying level. Accompanied by intense vibrations, Ron's soul barrier began to crack. Pa! Cracks began to appear one after another, spreading outwards like a spider. Within the cracks there were traces of dazzling light. Too much! Ron's heart almost jumped out of his body. He gritted his teeth and endured the pain of his soul force expanding. Almost! At this moment, there was a boom in Ron's mind, as if something had shattered, and his mind went blank for a moment. Powerful soul force overflowed and rushed to his limbs. At the same time, Ron's soul also completed its transformation. Advanced Archmage Necromancer. The scene in front of him distorted and gradually blurred. Soon, he could not see anything. He's going to die, that human is going to die, quickly kill him. The crowd was stirred up as they screamed and released their bestial desires. Big brother Ron! Basara did not dare to go down. She suddenly turned her head and closed her eyes. Boom! A loud sound rang out in the peaceful arena, and a cloud of smoke quickly spread out. Smoke filled the air, giving people a surreal feeling. Morin stared blankly and suddenly collapsed on the seat. Is he dead? Du Tan lost his composure. He had always been conflicted in his heart. He hoped that Ron would die, but when he died, he also felt a faint sense of loss. This time, the champion of the Battle of the Young Masters was still the magical beast clan. No, Li Jia said slowly. He dodged. Pornographic novel. What? Morin was shocked. Her eyes lit up with hope. Du Tan was shocked. How is this possible? The smoke and dust gradually dispersed, revealing the figures in the field. Is he dead? Where is he? Gone? The audience straightened their necks and started discussing in low voices. Things had gone beyond their expectations. They did not expect to see blood flying everywhere. A trace of horror flashed across the eyes of the figure floating quietly in the air. How was this possible? He was obviously hit by my poison needle. How is it possible that nothing happened to him? The eyes of the audience in the arena were also filled with disbelief. They started discussing among themselves. Was this energetic young man really the young man who was on the verge of death? At this moment, Na Po's body started trembling uncontrollably. This was because he realized that Rory, who had just woken up, was not weakened. On the contrary, he had become stronger. He had advanced by a whole level. This was not a simple matter. Especially for Nappa now, it was a nightmare. Ron, Basara could not help but cry tears of joy. She and Raindrop hugged each other tightly. Their faces were filled with joy. In the big box in the middle of the arena, Sarah's face flashed with surprise. This brat actually had a breakthrough? Du Tan's heart skipped a beat. What? Brother, who did you have a breakthrough? It's Ron, Sarah said calmly. It can't be helped. His luck is really good. He actually managed to break through from mid-ranked to high-ranked in the middle of the battle. Just now. Morin was surprised and happy. Grandpa, is this true? That's right. Li Jia smiled. From the brink of death to a complete comeback. I don't know if it's because of his luck or because of his ability. Even after being hit by the poison scorpion lion's poison needle, he seemed to be fine. Ancient death magic is really unbelievable, high-ranked in the middle, Du Tan muttered. A hint of jealousy flashed across his eyes. An expert in the middle was nothing in his eyes. Don't forget, this human in front of him was only 19 years old. Ron quietly floated in midair. There was no emotion in his eyes. He slowly said to Napo, "Admit defeat. You don't have any more chances. Admit defeat." Napo's heart felt like it had been stabbed. How could the noble poison scorpion lion of the magical beast race lower its head to a human like you? He gritted his teeth. The words "admit defeat" kept coming out of his mouth, but he could not bring himself to say it. Ron's eyes narrowed. His powerful aura continued to press down on Napo. With Napo's strength, he usually wouldn't put this power in his eyes. But now, his vitality was greatly damaged and he didn't have much strength to fight. Moreover, he had already lost the poison power that he was most proud of. I admit defeat. After a long time, Nappa finally said these few words. Although he was unwilling, he could only submit to Ron's strength. He won. Ron won. Ron won. After hearing the words "I admit defeat" from Nappa's mouth, the audience erupted into thunderous applause. Countless flowers flew down from above. Soon, the edge of the arena became a sea of flowers. They were paying their highest respect to the champion of the tournament of the strongest. Ron. Morin's face was full of emotions. She covered her mouth tightly, trying not to cry out loud. Ron did it. He really did it. The champion of the tournament of the strongest. This result was completely out of her expectations. Li Jia and Sala looked at each other and smiled. Although they felt that it was a pity that they did not get a higher ranking, Ron's victory had broken the magical beast's monopoly of the tournament of the strongest for many years. This could not be helped. Ron was a human. This was more or less surprising. Doton's face did not have much joy. Instead, he was slightly disappointed. A human had actually done something that the beastmen could not. What was going on? We finally won. Roth breathed a sigh of relief and smiled. He slowly descended from the sky and raised his hands to salute the audience. The orc judge on the side quickly ran over and raised Roth's arm up high, showing everyone on the field that he had obtained the final victory. Long live! At this time, the audience stood up and applauded loudly, congratulating Ron. The atmosphere in the arena was at its peak. Of course, there were some discordant voices. Some beastmen muttered softly. Was there a mistake? The champion was actually a human. At this moment, the poison scorpion lion, Nappa, transformed into his human form and pushed away the beastman referee who was trying to help him up. He limped over to Ron and sized him up a few times. He took a deep breath and asked seriously, "Ron, I didn't lose this battle unjustly. However, what I find strange is that after being hit by my poisonous needle, you are completely fine?" Ron smiled and answered, "I am a necromancer. I train in the power of the soul." Ron's answer was very clever. He did not reveal the truth, but he did not reveal the secret of the needle at the same time. There were not many people who knew that the needle of the venomous scorpion lion was a soul attack. Nappa came to a sudden realization, and a trace of emotion appeared in his eyes as he looked at Ron. The two of them looked at each other with tacit understanding. Nappa smiled and said sincerely, "Necromancy magic is indeed powerful. I admit defeat." After that, he raised Ron's other hand high to congratulate him for his final victory. In the long corridor at the side of the arena, Ron saw Morin, who had been waiting for him. When she saw Ron, Morin threw herself into his arms and sobbed softly. I almost thought you were dead." "It's okay. It's okay." Roth smiled and comforted her. "Am I not back now? I'm perfectly fine." Not only did Ron come back alive, but he also won the competition. When the competition was over 1,000 seconds away, he successfully broke through from an intermediate to a high-level necromancer. His power of the soul had grown to a terrifying level. He had never thought that a person's power of the soul could become so powerful. Ron raised his head slightly and saw Becerra, Raindrop, and Kay. Everyone was laughing together. "Ron, congratulations!" At this time, Zhu walked out from the side and said to Ron. There was a young man behind him who looked like a shaman. He was looking at Ron with an unhappy face. "Thank you." Ron smiled. "Ron, you are very powerful. I admit that I lost to you this time. However, the next time we meet, I will not lose to you again," Zhu said calmly. Ron nodded. "I will wait for you." Zhu smiled and said to the young man behind him, "Lei Dun, let's go." "Okay, brother." The young man named Lei Dun glared at Roth fiercely before he turned and left with Zhu. The finals of the Young Strongest tournament finally ended. Ron won the first place without a doubt. It was a miracle for a human to defeat so many powerful magical beasts and become the champion. Suddenly, Ron's name became a legend that spread throughout the entire imperial city of Zumur City. The finals of the Young Strongest tournament had ended, but the Young Strongest tournament was not over yet. Other than the first place Ron and the second place Nappa, the third place to the 10th place still had to be decided. Chapter 355. In the middle of the Colosseum, a huge stage was set up. Colorful flags fluttered on the stage, making it look like a festival. Today was the day of the Young Strongest Tournament's awards ceremony. After so many days of competition, the top 10 rankings were finally decided. Without a doubt, Ron was fully deserving of the first place. The second place naturally belonged to Nappa, who was defeated by Ron. The third place was also a magical beast. It was the magical beast of the 9th rank, the Lightning Leopard, who voluntarily retreated when facing Ron. The Class 9 magical beast Lightning Leopard was a dark-skinned, short, and sturdy youth. He was rejoicing over his wise choice. It was precisely because he didn't fight with Ron that he was able to preserve his strength and rush to third place. The Orc Empire's Flying Rider was ranked 6th. Because the fourth-ranked magical beast had died in an accident, the rest of the Orc Empire advanced by 1 place. The fifth-ranked magical beast became the fourth-ranked magical beast, and the sixth-ranked magical beast became the fifth-ranked magical beast, advancing by 1 place. The remaining 6 to 8 were all beastmen. After all, they were too powerful. However, 2 beastmen managed to squeeze into the 9th and 10th place. Now, there were 3 beastmen on the podium. For the Orc Empire, this was a bit of consolation. It must be known that in the past few years, there were no beastmen on the stage. It was only in the last tournament that they managed to squeeze in. This time, the 3 Sala Empresses were satisfied. During the ceremony, the 10 young experts stood in a row. Their faces were full of vitality. They were the elites of the elite. Their strength was not bad at their age, and their future achievements were limitless. When Ron's figure appeared on the stage, all the young experts lowered their heads, not daring to look at Ron. Even the powerful magical beasts lowered their heads. The host of the ceremony was the Beast Emperor, Sala Empress. At this time, he was wearing a golden emperor's robe that shone brightly under the sun. He stood in the middle of the stage, his dignified face somewhat benevolent. He was looking at the group of youthful experts with a smile. When his gaze fell on Ron, he paused for a moment and gave him a kind smile. Ron also gave a friendly smile and returned to his seat. Li Jia was seated on a stage not far away, smiling at them. Beside him were 2 people. One was Prince Dutton, the younger brother of the Beast Emperor Sala, and the other was Morin, the granddaughter of the war god Li Jia. She was also the chief of the Thorny Flower tribe. She was wearing an elegant purple dress, smiling at Ron. Her red face was filled with pride. Ron had obtained first place in the Young Heroes competition, bringing glory to the Thorny Flower tribe. This was something that money could not buy. It was no wonder she was so happy. Next, let's invite Sarah Country's Emperor to speak. A Beastman official cleared his throat. Sala walked up and started his long speech. The speech lasted for more than half an hour. The Beastmen did not dare to show any impatience in front of their country's emperor. However, the powerful Beastmen could not care less. Some of them started to get impatient, and some even started to doze off. I hope that all the young experts here can find their place on the path of becoming strong in the future and step onto a new stage. Sala was a good person. He observed the situation and ended his speech helplessly. Other than Zhu and the 2 orcs, no one else clapped. Sala felt quite helpless. After all, it wasn't just the citizens of the Orc Empire who were on the podium receiving the award. Now, let the awards ceremony begin, Sala announced. At this time, a row of Orc Shinv slowly walked up from below the stage. They were all beautiful young women around the age of 17 or 18. Without exception, they were all wearing revealing Orc clothing. Their beautiful faces were filled with shyness. They were holding a wooden tray in their hands. The tray was covered with a red cloth. It looked grand and mysterious. What's inside? Ron looked at the beautiful young beastmen holding the tray and couldn't help but wonder. The Beastmen Empire's young experts battle had such a big lineup. The prize should not be ordinary. Just as Ron was guessing, the red cloth on the tray was removed, revealing the item inside. This is, Ron was shocked when he saw the item on the tray. Although the other contestants did not lose their composure like Ron, they were also very surprised. The item on the dark red wooden tray was none other than black crystal coins. The pitch-black crystal coins lay quietly on the tray, reflecting a white light under the sunlight. Their smooth black surface was suffused with a strange power. Ron counted. There were a total of 6 black crystal coins in front of him. According to the market price, the 6 black crystal coins in front of him would be worth at least 100 million gold coins. Moreover, if all 6 black crystal coins were sold at the same time, the price would be even higher. After all, 6 black crystal coins were in short supply in the black market on the Noah continent. Even if one had the money, they could not be bought. It was extremely rare to see 6 black crystal coins being sold at once. Seeing this scene, Roth couldn't help but sigh inwardly. The Beastmen Empire was really generous. Black crystal coins were also very attractive to magic beasts. Beside him was the second-place Napa. His eyes were shining. However, the number of black crystal coins in front of Napo's tray was a little less, only 4. Ron was next. The number of black crystal coins in front of each contestant was not equal. As the first-place contestant, he had 6, the second-place Napa had 4, and the third-place Lightning Leopard only had 2. From the 4th place onwards, there were no more black crystal coins in their trays. There was only a crystal card. The number of crystal cards was unknown, but none of them were below silver rank. The highest crystal card was gold rank. The other contestants looked at the black crystal coins in the trays of the top 3 contestants with envy in their eyes. If possible, they really wanted to snatch the black crystal coins. After the Beastman official announced the rewards for the 1st to 10th place, he distributed the items on the trays to the contestants. At this moment, everyone had different expressions. Some were happy, some were regretful, and even some were angry. Of course, they couldn't show it in front of the Master of Strength. Those arrogant magic beasts didn't have the guts to cause trouble in front of the Master of Strength. Ron reluctantly put the 6 black crystal coins into his portal bag. Although he tried to keep a calm face, his heart was already bursting with joy. This was the first time he had earned so much money. The reward from the Battle of the Young Masters was far more than the Black Crystal mission in the other plane. Of course, it was also very dangerous. Ron had escaped death many times. At this time, the Beastman official said, "Everyone, the awards ceremony is over. Please return to your seats." At this time, he glanced at Ron and the others and said loudly, "Also, the top 3 contestants of the Young Masters competition will stay. The Master of Strength will meet you personally. He might even give you some pointers." The Master of Strength. Hearing this, Zhu's face was filled with passion. If there was anyone here who wanted to receive pointers from the Master of Strength the most, he was undoubtedly the most enthusiastic. Unfortunately, only the top 3 could have such an honor. At this moment, Zhu's face was filled with helplessness and disappointment. He shook his head and turned to leave. "Zhu, wait a minute." Just as Zhu was about to leave, he heard the Beastman official's voice. He turned around in shock. The Beastman official smiled and said, "Zhu, because you have entered the top 5 of the Young Masters competition this year and the previous year, and your performance was not bad, the Master of Strength will make an exception and give you some pointers." "What?" Hearing this, Zhu was surprised and happy. His eyes were filled with disbelief. He even stuttered, You? The Master of Strength will personally give me pointers?" The Beastman official smiled and nodded. "Follow me." Ron and the others glanced at Zhu and followed the Beastman official. "Come up." Li Jia laughed heartily. He pointed at the 4 chairs beside him and gestured for them to sit down. "Sit down. Don't be shy. There's no pointers or pointers. Let's chat casually." At this time, Li Jia smiled kindly. He didn't look like a Master of Strength at all. Instead, he looked like an old man next door. "Yes, Master of Strength." Everyone sat down according to their order. Zhu looked nervous, and he didn't know where to put his hands. Sarah, Dutton, and Molin also sat down at the side. Nappa didn't sit down. Instead, he smiled slightly. "Master of Strength, your strength is as dazzling as the sun in the Noah continent. Unfortunately, our cultivation systems are different. You're an orc, and I'm a magical beast. You can't help me in my cultivation. I think there's no need for pointers. If there's any reward, hurry up and give it to me. We'll leave Zoomer City as soon as possible." As soon as he said this, Sarah, Dutton, and the others' faces changed. Na Po's words were too disrespectful to the Master of Strength, a Master of Strength from the Divine Realm. Li Jia was not annoyed at all. He still had a smile on his face as he said slowly, "You're a child of the Mott family, right?" Mott Bronzebeard was the Lion King of the poisonous Manticore clan and Na Po's father. His strength had reached the sacred domain. As soon as Li Jia mentioned his father, Na Po immediately put away the smile on his face. "Master of Strength, do you know my father? We can't say that we know each other, but we haven't seen each other for many years." Li Jia smiled. Did your father ever tell you that you are overly reliant on the power of poison, and neglected the cultivation of the Ro fight skill?" Na Po's heart suddenly trembled when he heard this. His father had indeed told him this, but he had never taken it seriously. Li Jia smiled and said, "Your performance in the Young Masters tournament can be described as perfect. You advanced triumphantly all the way without tasting defeat, but in the end, you were defeated by Ron. Of course, Ron is an exception. However, if you can improve your Ro fighting skill, coupled with your poison attribute power, your strength should be able to reach a higher level." Nappa nodded in admiration when he heard this. He stood up and bowed deeply. "Thank you for your pointers, Master of Strength." Master of Strength also turned to the rank 9 Lightning Leopard and pointed out his weakness in strength. The rank 9 Lightning Leopard also admired him. "Master of Strength, you know so much." Master of Strength smiled and turned to look at Zhu, one by one, and immediately stood up. "Master of Strength, your strength is not bad and you fought very well. Although you lost, you still showed your true strength. Next, you need to strengthen the cultivation of your state of mind." Li Jia said calmly. "The cultivation of my state of mind." Zhu carefully pondered over Li Jia's words, but he still couldn't understand it. However, Li Jia didn't continue. He still needed to slowly understand everything, so Zhu could only sit down. Li Jia smiled and nodded, and his gaze fell on the champion of the Young Masters tournament, Ron. Before Li Jia could speak, Ron stood up and said, "Master of Strength, to be honest, it was an accident that I participated in the Young Masters tournament. I won first place by accident. According to the requirements of the Young Masters tournament, Master of Strength, can I make a request of you?" Li Jia nodded calmly. "You." Ron was nervous. He glanced at Morin and met her encouraging gaze. He mustered up his courage and said, "Master of Strength, I think you should know my background by now. I only have one purpose in coming here, and that is to ask for your help in removing the assassination order from the council." When everyone heard this, other than those who knew the inside story, they were all shocked. They only knew that Ron had such a past. Morin looked at her grandpa, and her face was filled with hope. Li Jia smiled slightly, blinked his eyes, and softly spat out a sentence from his thin mouth. Chapter 356. Li Jia's answer was completely out of Roth's expectations. It wasn't just Roth. Everyone present was stunned. Especially Morin. She didn't expect her grandfather to refuse directly. She immediately stood up and said, "Grandpa, didn't you say that you can make a request after winning the young tournament?" "Why?" Morin's pornographic novel. Her eyes were filled with confusion and uncertainty. In her opinion, the requirements of the previous champions of the tournament of the Young Masters had been met. Why was it that when it came to Ron? No reason. Li Jia smiled and looked at Roth. He said slowly, "Indeed, as the champion of the young tournament, who can make a request, but it doesn't mean that this request will be fulfilled. Sorry, I can't do this request, you'd better change your request." Everyone was silent, looking at Ron with sympathy in their eyes. In fact, Li Jia's worries were reasonable. It wasn't that he didn't have the ability to solve this matter. It was because he clearly knew that this matter was urged by Deputy Speaker Hao Qin. If he intervened in this matter, it meant that he would directly confront Hao Qin. Although they were both strong in the divine realm, Li Jia didn't think it was necessary. Everyone had their own interests to decide. Li Jia was no exception. Although Ron was a genius, it didn't mean that Li Jia would support him. Ron's eyes were full of disappointment. A trace of sympathy appeared on the other faces. Although the Noah continent was big in Ming-Yi, there was no place for Ron to stay. Morin bit her lip and turned her head away. She couldn't bear to see Roth's disappointed look. She sighed slightly. Ron's mouth was full of bitterness. His purpose of participating in the young tournament was to change his fate of being hunted down. Unfortunately, in the end, his hope was still lost. Everything was in place. Since Soy won't disturb you here anymore. Goodbye, everyone. Ron smiled bitterly. He bowed slightly and turned to leave. Morin bit her lip tightly, her expression complicated. Wait! At this time, Li Jia called out to him. Ron stopped and turned around in confusion. Li Jia smiled and said, Fellow, don't you want to hear the reward you should get as the winner of the young tournament? Is there any meaning to this? Ron smiled. He couldn't help but ask. If he didn't get rid of the Senate's killing order, he would live in fear for the rest of his life. If he lost his life, all the rewards would be meaningless. Riga smiled again at Salomon. Salomon, you'll be the one to announce the rest. Salomon nodded and smiled. Ron, because of your excellent performance in the tournament and your dazzling strength, the royal family has decided to grant you the title of the Golden Family of the Orc Empire. What? Golden Family? Hearing this, all the orcs were shocked, especially Du. He stood up, his face full of shock. Perhaps the magic beasts present did not know what the Golden Family of the Orc Empire was, but the orcs did. This also explained why they had lost their composure. The Golden Family of the Orc Empire had an important position in history, roughly equivalent to the human nobles. The most important point was that the title of the Golden Family would only be given to the orcs who had made meritorious contributions to the empire. In history, no race other than the orcs had ever received this honor. In other words, Ron was the first non-orc Golden Family in the history of the Orc Empire. Morin's face was full of joy. She winked at Ron, telling him to quickly agree to this. The surrounding beastmen looked at Ron with envious eyes and stood up. Congratulations, Ron. Although he said so, he couldn't hide the envy in his eyes. How about it? Ron, have you decided to accept this honor? Salomon asked with a smile. Now, as long as he agreed, this matter would be settled. But what was the point? Ron smiled bitterly. He was about to refuse, but he saw Morin desperately winking at him, telling him to agree. Ron couldn't help but hesitate. I don't agree. At this time, a voice interrupted. The one who spoke was Dutton. At this moment, he couldn't understand. He only won the battle of the young masters. How could he become a Golden Family? This Ron was just a human. He didn't have the qualifications. If Zhu Jiao won the battle of the young masters, there was still room for discussion. As for Ron, Dutton thought it was a bit too much. The title of Golden Family wasn't a cabbage. It wasn't easy to get it. With Dutton here, he didn't have the qualifications. Brother, isn't it too hasty to give Ron the title of Golden Family? With this human's strength and reputation, he doesn't have the qualifications. Dutton said solemnly. He glanced at Ron. Don't forget, he's just a lowly human. Dutton's words were extremely harsh. Ron couldn't help but frown. At this time, Salomon saw Li Jia's eyebrows slightly raised. A trace of displeasure flashed across his face. Salomon's heart trembled slightly. Although Li Jia didn't say anything, he could feel that Li Jia was dissatisfied with his brother. He immediately lowered his face and said protectively, Dutton, please pay attention to your status. In this matter, you don't have the qualifications to speak. When Dutton heard this, his mouth opened wide. He had never used such a tone with him before. This time, he was really angry. Coupled with Li Jia's expression, his own actions had caused Li Jia to be dissatisfied. Dutton could only lower his head resentfully. He didn't say anything else. Salomon heaved a sigh of relief. He was afraid that Dutton would say something inappropriate. At this time, he turned to Ron and smiled. Ron, what do you think? Ron knew that Morin was desperately trying to signal him with her eyes. She probably wouldn't harm him. Moreover, joining the Golden family didn't mean anything to him. Anyway, he was now like a drifting duckweed. He would go wherever it was safe. After thinking about it, Ron agreed. Okay, I agree. When Morin heard this, a smile appeared on her face. Only then did she put down the big stone in her heart. Things were settled just like that. Under Salomon's announcement, Ron became the only non-orc golden family in the Orc Empire. Napo and the rank 9 Lightning Leopard were also given important positions. However, after Salomon took the responsibility, they all declined. As the elites of the high-level magical beast family in the Kingdom of Warcraft, they couldn't serve the Orc Empire before they obtained the status of the family. Salomon also said this. Therefore, he didn't force it. As for Zhu, he had just joined the Orc army and became a legion commander with military power. Morin, why did you make me agree? After leaving, Ron asked Morin in the carriage. I can't stay in the Orc Empire without removing the hunting order from the council. What if the Holy See knows that I'm here and sends people to kill me? Don't worry. Grandpa must have his reasons for doing this. Morin smiled sweetly. It was like 100 flowers blooming together. Ron was stunned for a moment. Morin said, Our Orc Empire is different from your human empires. We have a powerhouse in the realm of the gods, which is my grandpa. Without his consent, no one else would dare to touch you in the Orc Empire. Except for those powerhouses in the realm of the gods, do you think they would make a big fuss in the Orc Empire for a child like you? You are. Ron thought and said, Is the great strength warrior protecting me in disguise? Yes. This is why Grandpa decided to give you the title of Golden Family. Morin smiled. Ron, think about it. Except for the Holy See, who would be interested in you? Ron, don't worry. The powerhouses in the Holy See and the Sacred Domain wouldn't dare to mess around in the Orc Empire. I see. Ron understood. He was safe for the time being, but only in the Orc Empire, or in the imperial capital of the Orc Empire, Zoomer City. Without the protection of the great strength warrior, he would still lose his life. Of course, there was a price to be paid for letting Ron stay. Both Li Jia and Salomon were struck by Ron's potential and incredible undead magic. They believed that Ron had incredible power. At his current age, he would one day break through the sacred domain. Letting Ron stay was for him to serve the Orc Empire. Ron was well aware of this. However, it was still a matter of time before he came over and ended the days of being hunted down. In a luxurious hotel in the imperial capital of the Orc Empire, Omega, a powerhouse of the Beaumont clan, and her fiancé, Tommy, were talking about something. But at this time, Omega was full of anger. You what? Say it again? Omega's voice suddenly rose an octave. Her eyes were wide open as she stared fiercely at Tommy. Tommy was so scared that he trembled. Intimidated by Omega's imposing manner, Tommy was so frightened that he stuttered, Dear, don't be angry. According to the news I got in the Holy See, that Ron no longer has those powerful corpses. What you mean is that his strength is no longer as strong as before, and he is no longer as strong as before? Yes. All of his combat puppets were destroyed by the Holy See, and one of them is sealed on Mount Hyjal. Tommy stuttered. Dear, we were all fooled by him. As soon as she heard this, Omega's emotions, which were difficult to calm down, were ignited again. She slammed the table fiercely, smashing it into pieces, and cursed, Damn human. Omega's anger was justified. She had backed out at the last minute of the tournament, which not only helped Ron's reputation and let him win the first place, but also made the noble Beaumont clan lose face, making her unable to raise her head in front of some magical beasts. For example, the poisonous scorpion lion Na-Po and the snake demon Palessa. Although they did not show anything on the surface, their previous respectful attitude was much worse than before. This kind of shameful and humiliating thing made Omega fly into a rage. She gritted her teeth and said, "Ron, I will not let you go, never." Tommy suppressed his nervousness. "Dear, Ron no longer has those powerful corpse puppets. Without those corpse puppets, he is no match for you. Omega, when are you going to avenge my father?" As soon as she heard this, Omega immediately calmed down and regained the look of a high-level magical beast. She said coldly, "I must kill him. Whether it is for your father's revenge or for my humiliation, he must die. But now is not the time to do it." Her eyes glinted. "Master Li De seems to appreciate this kid. Master Li De is a senator of the parliament. Even the ancestors have to give him some face. If we fight here, I won't stand a chance," Tommy said fiercely. "Then, let him live for a few more days. I will have someone keep an eye on him. As soon as he leaves Zoomer City." Tommy made a killing gesture. Chapter 357. "Brother Ron, come over here." Raindrop waved her hand and called out loudly. In the Orc Empire's capital, where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold, there was a 2-story luxurious mansion with a courtyard. This was the special treatment that Ron deserved as a member of the Orc Empire's golden family. Even though Ron did not lack money, he could not reject something that was given to him. Besides, Ron also needed a place to stay. He could not possibly stay in a hotel for the rest of his life. Thus, he accepted it. With money, a big mansion, and a few beautiful shinobis accompanying him, Ron could finally live the life of a noble. However, he did not feel happy at all. Instead, he felt troubled. What troubled him the most was the endless social activities of the Orc Empire's royal family. He had to attend all kinds of banquets. The Orc Empire's wine was also a must. He had to drink every banquet. Now, he would come home drunk every day. It had been like this for more than 10 days. He did not even have time to train himself. Now, he had to go and socialize again. In the luxurious room, other than Raindrop, Morin and Becerra were also there. They were busy helping Ron change his clothes. At this time, Ron protested unhappily. "I don't need to change my clothes. I just wore them at the banquet this afternoon. Do I have to change them now?" At this moment, Ron was wearing a large white robe. The robe had all kinds of strange patterns on it. There was a furry collar on his shoulder. It was said that this was the Orc tribe's precious traditional clothing. From afar, he looked like an orc. However, when paired with his thin face and frail human body, this robe looked out of place on him. Of course, the host of tonight's banquet is the Orc Empire's big boss, Old Marshal Jean Fong. He has a high status and holds great power. Even though he has retired, he is still a figure that can shake the Orc Empire. There will be many political officials attending. How can we not make it grand? While Morin was rambling on about the importance of the banquet, she was carefully helping Ron tidy up the complicated clothes and various accessories. After the competition, Morin did not return to the Thorny Flower tribe for the time being. Instead, she stayed in Ron's mansion. She said that she was there to take care of him, but in reality, she was there to bring him around to socialize and get to know some important people in the Orc Empire. Morin was very talented, and she had a lot of power in the royal circle. Even the Beast King Sala had to give her some respect. Ron could only sigh faintly and did not say anything. In fact, he did not like this kind of work. He did not have a high tolerance for alcohol and hated social interactions even more. If he could make an appointment, he would rather cultivate alone in the wild. Although it was a bit bitter, it could train his will. Unlike the clothes of the orcs, this traditional costume of the Golden family was extremely complicated and difficult to wear. The three of them spent a long time before they could wear it. Looking at the depressed Ron in the traditional costume, Becerra and Raindrop almost doubled over in laughter. Morin tilted her head and looked carefully for a while. She smiled satisfactorily and said, "Heh, this is more like it. How handsome. She pulled Ron's hand and spun him around. With a helpless face, Ron could not help but laugh out loud. Let's go then. Ron was speechless and sighed. He thought to himself that he was going to get drunk again today. He should drink less. Ron, Morin, Becerra, and Raindrop walked downstairs. There was already a carriage waiting for them in the courtyard downstairs. The 5 of them boarded the carriage and left. In the spacious hall, a luxurious banquet was being held. The long square table was filled with food and wine. Countless young and beautiful human women were shuttling around. All the guests drank until their faces and ears were red. It was not lively at all. Such banquets were first popular in the Human Empire and then in the Orc Empire. Large banquets had become a part of the daily life of the Orcs. Through banquets they achieved their goals. When Ron, Morin, and the rest arrived at the banquet hall, there were already many guests gathered. Most of them were important figures in the military. Every move they made was filled with the aura of a soldier. Compared to the army of the Human Empire, the Orcs' army was much stronger. In the Orc Empire, the army had a special status. Becerra, Raindrop, and Kay also appeared at the banquet as guests. They were also wearing festive clothing. That's Joie. A foreign Orc general who did not know Ron asked someone beside him in a low voice. You don't even know him. He's the champion of the Young Best tournament. His name is Ron. Another person explained. Champion of the Young Best tournament? How is that possible? Hasn't the Young Best tournament always been dominated by the magical beasts? How could he be the champion? And a human at that? He is indeed the champion of the Young Best tournament. Many powerful magical beasts have fallen in his hands. Another Orc laughed and said, I see. The Orc general heard and was filled with respect. Ron and Morin attracted everyone's attention once they appeared in the banquet hall. Compared to the status of the Golden family, they were more interested in Ron's identity as the champion of the Young Best tournament. Ron, this is old Marshal Jean Fong. Morin smiled and bowed. Her every move was filled with elegance. She pulled an old Orc man aside and introduced him to Ron. So you're Ron. It's the first time we've met. You're indeed a young hero. Being able to become the champion of the Young Best tournament is not an easy feat. Your future is limitless. Old Marshal Jean Fong smiled kindly. He clinked the cup in his hand with Ron's and downed it in one gulp. Ron smiled as well. He followed the old marshal's example and downed the wine. After that, he quietly looked at the old marshal. The old marshal's body was ramrod straight. The unique aura of an iron-blooded military man emanated from his body. A sacred domain master? Ron was shocked. This old marshal was a person who had hidden his strength well. Ron's alcohol tolerance was poor. After downing a cup of wine, his pale face turned red. Old Marshal Jean Feng's sharp eyes immediately noticed Ron's embarrassment. He smiled and said with concern, Young man, eat something later. Don't drink so much wine, thank you, Marshal. Ron looked at old Marshal Jean Feng gratefully. Old Marshal Jean Feng laughed heartily. Young man, there's no need to be so polite. Come visit my house when you're free. The old marshal extended an invitation. He was full of admiration for Ron. He knew very well that it was not easy for a human to stand out in the Orc Empire. He's a busy man. Old Marshal Wong thought to himself. Niece Morin, accompany Ron. The old marshal laughed heartily. Most of the people here today are my old subordinate. This old man is fine. Tell Ron to get closer to them. However, don't let him drink too much. Yes, Grandpa Jean Fong. Morin smiled sweetly and bowed. Old Marshal Jean Fong smiled and walked away. At this time, Ron shrugged. I don't think I can come over. I feel out of place with the atmosphere here. I don't even know how to drink. To be honest, I might as well stay in the house and cultivate. Morin smiled and said, pornographic novels. You have all the time in the world to cultivate, but you're in the Orc Empire. There are some people you have to know. You have the title of the champion of the Battle of the Young Masters, so they'll most likely give you some face." She then ignored Ron's protest and pulled Ron to another table. Before they came over, a few orc generals came over and chatted with Morin. Ron had no choice but to drink a few more cups. Compared to the daytime, the night in the Orc Empire's capital, Zuma City, was a little creepy. Under the dim light, a figure in white slowly walked over. She was wearing a hood and her whole body was wrapped in clothes. No one could see her face, but judging from her figure, she should be a human woman. She slowly walked into a tavern. It was a low-class tavern. The dim light reflected the red wine of the mercenaries, which was mixed with a muddy and unpleasant smell. Everyone present was a human mercenary. The noble orcs would not come to such a place. When the woman walked into the tavern, everyone in the tavern quieted down. What did it mean for a single woman to appear in the middle of the night? It aroused the imagination of the human mercenaries. The beautiful figure of the woman in front of them, although they couldn't see her face clearly, made some of the mercenaries' hearts move. After the woman walked in, she looked around. After hesitating for a moment, she went straight to a group of mercenaries. There were more than a dozen of them, and they were all around a table. They were drunk until their faces and ears were red. When the woman walked over, the mercenaries were looking at her with unscrupulous eyes. Their eyes were filled with lustful desire. At this time, the leader of the mercenaries stood up and smiled. "Beautiful woman, how can I help you?" He gave up the seat next to him and motioned for her to sit down. The eyes of the surrounding human mercenaries lit up. While they were drunk, they boldly looked at the woman's perfect figure in front of them. "I want to ask you something." The woman's voice was calm and emotionless. "Where is the champion of the Orc Empire's Young Masters Tournament, Ron?" The mercenaries looked at each other. After all this time, in the middle of the night, this woman was looking for the champion of the Young Masters Tournament, Ron. Who was she? When the mercenaries heard this, they suddenly realized that they were all knowledgeable. Moreover, Ron was very popular recently. How could they not know him? "Oh, so you are looking for him." The leader of the mercenaries smiled and said, "Hee. Ron won the Young Masters Tournament and was appreciated by His Majesty the Beast King. He is the pride of us humans, oh right? His Majesty the Beast King also gave him a mansion. Oh, it's just a few blocks to the west." "Very good." The woman lowered her head and took out a large amount of gold from her dimensional bag. Then, she poured a large amount of gold on the table. The group of poor human mercenaries were stunned. "Interesting. Take it and drink," the woman said coldly and walked out of the tavern. Chapter 358. There was a whole pile of gold coins on the table. It was so yellow that it dazzled the eyes of the mercenaries. Underworld novels. Although there were only a few hundred gold coins on the table, it was a huge fortune for these mercenaries who came from the lower levels. Without much thought, a pair of trembling hands quickly reached over and grabbed a handful of gold coins on the table. As a result, this attracted even more people. "It's mine, it's mine. I don't want the spear." The table suddenly became chaotic. Everyone's eyes flashed with crazed desire. Their hands tightly held onto the gold coins, unwilling to let go. "Bastards! All of you, stop it!" The leader of the mercenaries stood up in exasperation and scolded these insensible subordinates. He wanted to control these people's craziness, but unfortunately, no one listened to him at this time. Swoosh! Until the leader of the mercenaries aggressively pulled out his shining sword, the chaotic situation calmed down. "All of you, put it down." The leader of the mercenaries' face was full of killing intent. If something went wrong, his sword would not hesitate to chop down. Those who held the gold coins in their hands reluctantly put the gold coins back on the table under the leader's threat. The leader of the mercenaries coldly snorted and put the sword back into the space bag. "Look at you guys. Just these gold coins were enough to buy you guys over. Is there a need to be like this?" I think you guys almost fought, the leader of the mercenaries said angrily. Seeing the leader angry, the mercenaries looked at each other and became silent. Leader, we haven't had money for a long time. We really can't stand it anymore. Brothers also need to eat, a small mercenary said softly. He was indeed afraid of being poor. Yes, yes, another one agreed. Leader, we haven't received a suitable mission for many days. We are a little tight on money, the mercenaries said one after another. Did I say that these gold coins are mine alone? Did I say that? The leader of the mercenaries coldly stared at the crowd. These unexpected fortunes naturally belong to everyone. Everyone has a share. No one can take it all alone. But you guys took it all one by one. How am I supposed to divide it? His words made the mercenaries unable to raise their heads. Seeing this, the leader of the mercenaries softened his tone. I also know that our brothers are tight on money during this period of time. How about this? Let's split the money now. Everyone agreed. Soon, the gold coins on the table were emptied. Everyone held the gold coins in their hands and smiled. These people were a small group of ruffians in Zumur City. They had no other skills except for bragging, stealing, and flirting with women. It was not easy for them to get a few mercenary badges, which made them even more shameless and arrogant, and they went around swindling people. They weren't strong enough, so they couldn't accept any of the missions that could earn them money. Some of the missions that they did accept even resulted in heavy casualties. Left with no choice, they could only eat and drink here to pass the time. At this time, a mercenary leaned close to the mercenary boss's ear and said, "Boss, I think that woman, she should have a lot of goods in her pocket. Why don't we?" Everyone's thoughts became active. Good, that woman just now was so generous, casually giving out a few hundred gold coins. Moreover, she was alone. It was really easy to make a move on her. These people might not be good at other things, but they were very good at robbing. Yes, boss, let's go up and rob her. Yes, boss. Let's do it. Once we rob her, we won't have to worry about the rest of our lives. That's a good idea. Skinny Monkey, you usually don't show off, but you came up with such a good idea at this critical moment. That woman has a good figure. She's curvy in all the right places. Our brothers can have some fun after making a fortune. When the ruffians heard this, their eyes lit up. Their eyes were filled with naked greed and lust. The mercenary boss hesitated for a moment. He felt that something was wrong. That woman dared to walk alone in Zumur City at night, so she shouldn't be that simple. Oh, boss, don't think about it. Isn't she just a foreign human woman? She's not an orc. There are so many of us, can't we deal with her? Yes, boss, hurry up and make a decision. Everyone will be gone if we delay. If you don't go, we'll go. The group of ruffians urged one after another. The mercenary boss glanced around at the crowd and saw that their eyes were flashing fiercely. He was shocked. It was taboo to block someone's path to wealth. It was fine if he didn't go, but it would be bad if he didn't allow others to go. All right. The mercenary boss finally made up his mind. He couldn't resist the temptation of gold coins. This was a fat sheep, and it would be a waste not to take advantage of it. It's just robbery. Anyway, it's not the first time I've done it. The mercenary boss comforted himself. After making the decision, the group immediately got up and paid the bill. One by one, they walked out of the tavern and slowly disappeared into the night, chasing after the mysterious woman. Little did they know that what was waiting for them was not gold coins, but a grim reaper with a scythe. The mysterious woman walked in front. She walked very slowly, as if she had something on her mind. After turning a corner, she entered a remote place. There were dark woods on both sides, and no one could be seen. At this time, the mysterious woman stopped abruptly and stared behind her with a pair of cold eyes. Who's there? Get out of here. I didn't expect you to see through one of us so quickly after farting, a voice said. At this time, the mercenary boss walked out of the woods. There were more than 10 underlings following behind him. He looked carefree and fearless. There were more than 10 of them, and under the mercenary boss's signal, they surrounded the mysterious woman. "It's you guys." The mysterious woman recognized them. Weren't they the people who asked for directions in the tavern? She frowned and said unhappily, "What's the matter?" Hee. The mercenary boss laughed dryly. "Nothing much. It's just that us brothers are short on money recently, and we want to borrow some money from you," the boss said, and looked at the woman's eyes darting around quickly. He was thinking about his next reaction. They were almost certain that they could extort money from the woman, but they wanted more. That was how the local ruffians were. As long as you gave an inch, they would take a mile, and become even more arrogant. However, after the boss said that sentence and waited for a long time, he didn't see any reaction from the woman. The strange thing was, she didn't even say a word. She just stood there quietly. She couldn't have been scared silly, right? The mercenary boss thought and said again. He still didn't get any response. At this time, he became impatient and snorted. He waved his hand and said fiercely, "Bastard, you think you'll be fine if you don't say anything? Brothers, let's go. Strip this little bitch naked." Yes, following the boss's order, the underlings all agreed. They smiled maliciously and approached the mysterious woman from all directions. Looking at the mysterious woman's graceful body, their eyes flashed with naked lust. "Humph, you guys don't know what's good for you," the woman sneered. The robe on her body moved silently, and a powerful aura instantly spread out. Her slender body left the ground and slowly rose up. Her beautiful eyes stared at the ruffians, and a trace of mockery flashed in her eyes. This is, the ruffians were dumbfounded. Each and every one of them opened their mouth. Their eyes were full of shock. They had imagined thousands of scenarios, but they didn't expect that such a scene would happen to them. The mercenary boss's eyes flashed with intense fear. His mind was in chaos. His body couldn't help but tremble. His eyes were lifeless. Sacred Domain Powerhouse? Sacred Domain Powerhouse! She's a Sacred Domain Powerhouse? When the ruffians heard this, they finally knew that they had kicked an iron plate this time. Run, it was unknown who said this, but at this time, with a crash, those ruffians struggled and scattered. At this moment, they wished their mothers had more legs so that they could run further away. However, some people's legs were weak, and they couldn't run no matter what. These ruffians were so regretful that their intestines turned green. If they knew that this woman was a Sacred Domain Powerhouse, they wouldn't have come even if they were beaten to death. At this time, they all understood why this woman dared to travel alone and why she had so many gold coins. It was all because she was a Sacred Domain Powerhouse. Who would dare to have ideas about her? Those who had ideas about her were already dead. The mercenary boss secretly complained in his heart. This time, he had to escape with his life. No matter what, he wouldn't do such a thing next time. "Hee, do you think you can escape?" The woman laughed coquettishly. After saying that, her body moved. A circle of light suddenly spread out, as if it had substance, instantly enveloping all the ruffians. All the ruffians were enveloped. None of them could escape. The anger of a Sacred Domain Powerhouse wasn't so easy to quell. "Master, please spare us, please let us go, we won't dare to do it again." When the ruffians saw that they couldn't run away, they all begged for mercy. The mercenary boss's body trembled. He couldn't run far. Under the pressure of the mysterious woman, even his legs were weak. Master, I won't dare to do it again. Please let us go. I have an 80-year-old mother." The man's eyes were filled with fear. With a dong sound, he knelt on the ground. With snot and tears running down his face, he looked really pitiful. Seeing this, the other ruffians followed suit. They knew that whether they lived or died depended on this woman's attitude. Their lives were in her hands. "Hee, now you know how to beg for mercy?" What were you doing earlier? The ruffian begged for mercy, but the woman didn't move. She coldly stared at the man kneeling in front of her. If the one standing here today was a single woman who didn't have the strength to resist, would you let her go? Ah! The mercenary boss raised his head in shock. After saying that, the woman's figure suddenly flashed. A burst of miserable cries came from the forest. At this time, a dazzling white light flashed. Then, everything returned to silence. Not long after, the woman quietly walked out of the forest. She didn't even have the interest to look back. At this time, the woman's lips curled into a cold smile. Ron, this is only a warm-up. I now declare that the day of your death has arrived. She slightly raised her head. Under the hood, a pair of beautiful eyes flashed with killing intent. At this time, the woman slowly took off her hood, revealing her peerlessly beautiful face. She was actually the priest of the Holy Sea's Hall of Redemption, Emana. Chapter 359. Ron sighed as he watched the crowd pass by. This banquet was too boring. He really did not know why the orcs liked to hold banquets so much. Although he had to admit that the songs and dances were beautiful, almost all banquets were like this. No matter how delicious the dishes were, one would get tired of eating them every day. Novel-ranking Ron, what are you thinking about? Why do you look so bored? At this time, Becerra walked over with a glass of red wine in her hand. She was wearing a bright red dress today. She looked very charming, especially her beautiful snow-white chest, which made Ron's heart flutter. Ron did not answer. He only raised his glass. Becerra clinked her glass with his, and the two drank. At this time, Ron smiled and said, "It's really boring. There are such social events every day. Although I've become a member of the Golden family, to be honest, I still want to go back to my previous carefree self," Becerra smiled. Me too. When I first attended a banquet like this, I thought it was very novel. But after attending so many banquets, I just feel bored. Oh yeah, didn't you go dancing? Ron smiled and changed the topic. There would be dancing parties at the same time as the banquet. The elegant dances were also passed down from the humans. The orcs only knew how to dance coarsely. No. Ron, you know that I never dance with others. Of course, other than you. The charming Becerra was invited by many people at the banquet, but she politely rejected them all. It was not that she did not know how to dance, but she did not want to. She was born in the Gypsy tribe, which was good at singing and dancing. She was born with a talent for singing and dancing. Ron smiled and looked at the singing and dancing. At this time, Becerra smiled. Her warm body leaned over and blew into Ron's ear. She bit Ron's ear and said, "Do you think they dance well?" Ron only felt a soft and warm body in his arms. The little vixen in his arms was rubbing her full breasts against his arm. He was distracted for a moment. Beautiful, beautiful. The strange thing when I jumped to Library 56 was that all the orcs, including Riga, showed a respectful expression. The great ancestor was naturally not the name of the old beast man, but no one dared to call him by his name. At this moment, Ron's eyes narrowed. He discovered that the old beast man called the great ancestor wasn't simple at all. He was a shaman, but he had reached the sacred domain realm. And this realm had another title, the prophet. He's not a simple character. Ron thought to himself. He didn't dare to be negligent and bowed deeply. He was thinking about how to get close to this big shot of the Orc Empire. At this time, the old ancestor actually spoke first. "My great-grandson-in-law, you're finally here, what?" Ron raised his head in astonishment. He thought, is this old orc calling me? He looked around. It seemed that he was the only one standing there, and the old ancestor was looking at him with a smile. He turned to look at Morin. He saw that her face was also filled with shock. Then, 2 red clouds appeared on her pale face. She clearly didn't expect this. There was only one great-granddaughter in this side hall, and that was her. Moreover, she had a good relationship with the old ancestor, so it was no wonder that Morin was so embarrassed. Ron looked around and saw that everyone, including Riga, had a sluggish expression. It seemed that they hadn't reacted yet. After a long time, the Beast Emperor Salomon reacted. He awkwardly smiled and said, "Old ancestor, niece Morin isn't married yet." The old ancestor ignored Salomon's words and showed an expression of "you're an idiot." At this time, he stood up and walked down from his seat with a smile. He said, "My great-grandson-in-law, let this old man take a good look at you." The old ancestor held a long staff and shakily walked down from his seat. When he arrived in front of Ron, Molin immediately ran over and stretched out her hand to support him. The old ancestor smiled and sized up this human youth, who was only 19 years old. He had a look of appreciation in his eyes and said with a smile, "Not bad, not bad. My great-grandson-in-law is really handsome. Great-granddaughter, you have good taste." Everyone's expression was a bit strange. They saw that Riga wanted to laugh but couldn't. His expression was uglier than crying. Ron glanced at Morin and saw that Morin's face was also full of embarrassment. Needless to say, this great-granddaughter was her great-grandson-in-law? Is he old and muddle-headed? Ron muttered in his heart. Seeing that the old beast man looked as if he had been blown away by a gust of wind, he was even more certain of his guess. At this time, he felt that he should stand up and explain. "Old ancestor, hello. My name is Ron, I'm a human. I'm friends with Miss Morin, not your great-grandson-in-law." The old ancestor acted as if he didn't hear him and said with a smile, "Well, I know. You're Ron, my great-grandson-in-law. Old ancestor, he's not your great-grandson-in-law, he's just a human." At this time, Dutton interrupted and deliberately pointed out Ron's human identity. The old ancestor ignored him. "Look at what you're saying. How could I not know my great-grandson-in-law?" "Old ancestor, you've got the wrong person. I'm not your great-grandson-in-law." At this time, Ron patiently explained. "Well, yes, great-grandson-in-law, I'm not, got it, great-grandson-in-law." No matter how hard Ron tried to explain, the old beast man, who was so old that he could barely walk, repeatedly said the same thing. He believed that Ron was his great-grandson-in-law. Hearing this, some people's hearts were as clear as day. They had already guessed that the old ancestor intended to betroth Morin to the champion of the Battle of the Strongest, Ron. They thought that this kid's luck was not ordinary. Morin was born in the Golden family. Her status was not ordinary. She was beautiful and had many suitors in the Beastman Empire. Even Prince Dutton was attracted to her. Morin was definitely not an unmarriageable Beastman woman. She had always been single. This was her own choice. Ron was at his wits' end. He looked at Morin for help. Morin's face also showed a helpless expression. She looked at her grandfather. Li Jiao was also helpless. Although he admired Ron, he was not mentally prepared to marry his granddaughter to a human. However, he did not dare to disobey the old ancestor's words. He could only smile and say, "Morin, the old ancestor is old. His legs are not as good as they used to be. You should let him sit down and talk." "Yes, Grandpa," Morin said sweetly. She gave Ron a look, telling him not to say anything. She then helped the old ancestor to the seat in the middle. "Old ancestor, let's talk over there." "Well, okay. My great-granddaughter is still the best to me." The old ancestor grinned. Seeing the old ancestor walk away, Ron breathed a sigh of relief. Being treated as Morin's husband was too much of a joke. No matter how he looked at it, it was not realistic. At this time, Li Jia gave a signal, and an orc came forward to invite him out of the side hall. Ron did not want to stay here for a moment longer, so he left after saying goodbye. After a while, Morin walked out of the side hall again. When she saw Ron, her face flushed red for a moment, but she quickly returned to normal. She said apologetically, I'm sorry, Ron. The old ancestor is old. His head is not as good as it used to be. Maybe he recognized the wrong person. Please don't mind. I don't mind. Ron smiled magnanimously. At this time, he asked, "Oh right, who is that old ancestor?" "He is my grandfather's father-in-law, and also my grandmother's father." Morin smiled. Oh. Ron suddenly realized. No wonder even Li Jia gave in to him. It turned out that he was Li Jia's father-in-law. "Ron, I want to talk to the old ancestor for a while. He likes me very much," Morin said at this time. "Okay, I'll wait for you," Ron said with a smile. "Go back quickly. Don't let the old ancestor wait for too long." After saying goodbye to Morin, Ron returned to the hall. At this time, a hurried figure came out from the side and bumped into Ron. The wine in the figure's hand spilled and splashed on Ron. "I'm sorry," the figure said apologetically. "I didn't mean it." "It's okay." Ron smiled magnanimously. He only felt that it was a pity for this expensive traditional costume. Although he did not like to wear it, the price was not low. "This is..." At this time, Ron's heart skipped a beat. He wondered why this voice sounded so familiar. He suddenly raised his head and saw a familiar face. He was shocked. Chapter 360. The person who came was wearing a blue dress, her long hair flowing down her bright and smooth back, and her beautiful eyes rippling with moving colors. When she saw Luo Shi, she cried out in surprise, "Ron? How could it be you?" The person who came was none other than Luo, his former classmate at the Balarax Academy, Princess Kadena from the Kingdom of Doro. "Oh, so it's you. Long time no see. Kadena." Ron recovered from the initial shock and greeted her with a smile. He was still very happy to see a classmate in a foreign land. You went to the Orc Empire?" Kadena looked up and down at Ron, only to see that he was wearing traditional Orc clothing. If she didn't look carefully, she would really think that he was an Orc. "You can say that." Ron thought for a moment. "By the way, why did you come here?" Kadena smiled. "Of course I have to come here. Our Kingdom of Doro is a small country, adjacent to the Orc Empire. We usually have a lot of contact with them, and the relationship between the two sides is also good. Today is the old Marshal's birthday, so we rushed over, I see." Ron nodded, looking at Kadena's still beautiful face with a myriad of thoughts in his heart. At the same time, he felt that Kadena's strength was stronger than before, her whole body was full of water elements. His heart skipped a beat. "Katina, if I'm not wrong, you've already graduated from the Balarax Academy, right?" Hearing this, Kadena's face showed a smile. "Of course, I'm now a junior water magus. The academy wanted me to stay and teach, but I refused." Ron smiled. "It's not bad to stay and teach at the academy. Don't you have the best relationship with Shea? If she stays, how can you leave?" When she heard Shea, Kadena's face darkened. "Sister Shea also doesn't teach at the academy, what?" Ron was shocked. He did not think that Shea had also left the academy. After listening to Kadena's story, Shea also handed in her resignation letter to the academy after Ron left, saying that she wanted to become a mercenary. She still remembered that night when Sister Ye left the academy. The two of them got drunk and hugged each other until dawn. "Shea," Ron murmured. The image of Shea's beautiful face appeared in his mind. "By the way, how are the people in room 302 that I used to stay in? Are they okay?" Ron was more concerned about Fatty Manny and the others, so he took the opportunity to ask. Princess Angel dropped out. "I don't know about the others. I don't really care about the other dorms," Kadena said apologetically. She then smiled. "Ron, don't change the topic. You have to tell me what happened between you and Sister Shea." Ron was nervous and said awkwardly, "Nothing happened." "You're overthinking it, nothing? You're lying. After you ran away from the academy, Sister Shea seemed to have lost her mind. You said nothing happened between you and her?" I wouldn't believe it even if you beat me to death. Kadena pouted. The two of them were like old friends who had not seen each other for a long time. They started chatting in the hallway. Before they knew it, they had chatted for a long time. Both of them were immersed in their beautiful memories. Reynolds, where's Kadena? At the banquet, the king of the kingdom of Doro, a short and fat middle-aged man, walked over and asked Raiden. He was Kadena's father and was also a guest at the old marshal's birthday banquet tonight. However, looking at his fat body, he had given birth to a beautiful daughter. At this moment, Raiden was chatting passionately with a beautiful beast woman. When he heard this, he turned around and was slightly surprised. She said she went to the washroom. Is she not back yet? I don't see her. King Doro looked around but did not see Kadena's figure. Oh, then I'll go look for her. Reynolds was worried when he heard this. His fiancée's beauty was outstanding. He was afraid that she would attract those droolers like flies. The men who wanted to get her could probably line up from here to the streets, so he was very worried. All right, you can look around. She should still be here. Saying this, King Doro let out a faint sigh as he looked at Layton. Kadena is my only daughter. Now that I've decided to give her to you, I hope you can make her happy. But since she got engaged with you, why haven't I seen her smile? Reynolds was slightly stunned and hurriedly said, Your Majesty, please believe in Reynolds. I will definitely make Princess Kadena happy. I promise. King Doro shook his head and walked away. Reynolds sighed. Although His Majesty the King's words were very calm, he had to admit that his fiancée Kadena's smile was becoming less and less. Shaking his head, Reynolds looked around the banquet hall. The banquet hall was filled with people coming and going. Beastmen and humans were mixed in, so he couldn't find anyone for a while. Where's Kadena? Reynolds muttered. At this time, his gaze focused. In a corner of the corridor, Reynolds found Kadena's figure. At this moment, she was happily chatting with a small beastman. Her pale face revealed a trace of red, like 100 flowers blooming. From afar, the two of them looked very intimate. The beastman seemed to be saying something that made Kadena giggle. Who is he? Suddenly seeing this scene, Reynolds couldn't help but surge up. His fiancée's laughter was like a knife cutting through his heart. In his memories, Kadena had never laughed at him like this. This bastard, I definitely won't forgive him. Reynolds was blinded by anger. His face revealed a murderous aura as he took large strides towards the two people. Right, Ron, how are you and Aurora? I heard that you two are not in love? How is it, you two got into a bit of trouble and dropped out? Aurora! Ron bitterly smiled. This name that hadn't appeared for a long time once again caused ripples in his heart. Ron admitted that even after going through so many storms, Aurora's former lover had always occupied a place in his heart. It had never disappeared. Just as he was about to answer, a strong sense of crisis appeared in his heart. He turned his head and saw a face distorted with anger. That human was waving his fist and ruthlessly punching him. Reynolds was extremely angry. His huge fist was shining with a glaring light. This fist, he actually used Dochi. Who is this guy? Ron was shocked, but he didn't think too much about it. He immediately summoned his bone shield, and in an instant, a solid bone shield formed from black mist opened up and blocked the attacker's sudden attack. At the same time, he pulled Kyanara into his arms to protect her, because he wasn't sure if the attack was aimed at him or her. Boom! The powerful Do-Chi of the four schools exploded, causing a slight tremor in the room. A fist-sized hole appeared in the solid bone shield, but fortunately it didn't break through. Ron frowned. The attacker actually had the strength of a junior grand swordsman. Kadena's face turned pale with fright. When she saw the person in front of her, she immediately became angry. Reynolds, are you crazy? Who is he? At this moment, Reynolds was furious. He pointed at Ron and asked fiercely. Only then did he realize that this person wearing traditional orc clothing was a human. He is my classmate, Ron, Ron. Reynolds, who was mad with anger, came over at this moment, but when he heard Ron's two sons, the calmness in his heart rose again. That's right, this was the man who had been accompanying Kadena when she was in a bad mood. I'm going to kill him. At this moment, Reynolds's fire burned even more fiercely. At this moment, he attacked again, leading the powerful Do-Chi of the fist towards Ron. Reynolds, stop it! At this moment, Kadena pounced forward like an angry lion, blocking in front of Ron. Reynolds couldn't continue his attack. He glared with bloodshot eyes and growled like a beast. Kadena, get out of the way. Let me kill this guy. Reynolds, you're crazy. If you want to kill him, kill me first. Kadena didn't budge an inch as she stared coldly at Reynolds. At this point, Ron's face turned white. He knew Reynolds too. He had seen him once at the Moulin Rouge. He was indeed Kadena's fiancé. It seemed like the two of them were fighting because of him. However, he was innocent. At this moment, Ron was standing in a pornographic novel. He couldn't laugh or cry. He could only rub his nose awkwardly and keep quiet. He thought to himself, why is it that nothing good happens every time he meets Kadena? Using combat chi in the hall naturally alerted the banquet guests. Not long after, the surrounding guests gathered around. There were beastmen and humans among them. Many of them were even old Marshal Jean Feng's subordinate. When they saw that someone had done it at old Marshal Jean Feng's birthday banquet, their faces darkened. Brother Ron. At this time, Rainey, Becerra, and Kay walked over quickly and stood firmly beside Ron as they stared fiercely at Reynolds. Ron, what happened? Becerra asked softly. Nothing, just a small misunderstanding. Ron shook his head helplessly. The king of Doro Kingdom, the short and fat middle-aged man, also walked over quickly. Kadena, my daughter. How are you? Are you okay? Father, I'm fine. Kadena shook her head. Reynolds, how could you lay your hands on Kadena? You even caused trouble at old Marshal Jean Feng's birthday banquet. Reynolds, give me a reasonable explanation. King Doro's face was green as he yelled angrily. Your Majesty, it has nothing to do with me. It's Kadena, her behavior was improper. She hooked up with that person. Reynolds stared fiercely at Ron, wishing he could chew him up and swallow him. Kadena became even angrier. Who's behaving indiscreetly? Who hooked up with him? He's my classmate from Ballarak's academy, okay? Oh, many people at the banquet knew Ron, the champion of the Young Talents competition from the Human Empire. Upon hearing this, they suddenly realized that it was just that human who was jealous. They're all classmates who met in a foreign land. It's normal for them to reminisce. That guy is too narrow-minded. At that moment, all the guests' gazes were filled with contempt towards Reynolds. To see the first commercial-free episode, please visit GrainNet. Chapter 361. King Doro frowned, thinking that Reynolds was too insensible. Not to mention Kadena's behavior, even if it was true, he shouldn't have said it in public. As a father, King Doro naturally believed in his daughter. At this time, his face sank. Reynolds, watch your words. Your behavior isn't the proper upbringing of a noble. Reynolds was reprimanded by King Doro, and his face turned green and white. What's the matter, Reynolds? What are you doing? At this time, a voice was heard. Ron's gaze focused and looked over, only to see a dignified middle-aged man walking out of the crowd. He was wearing a blue robe, and his two sword-like eyebrows were raised high. His expression was uncertain, and his whole body was emitting an intimidating aura. A powerhouse from the sacred domain. Ron's heart shivered. He didn't think that this middle-aged man's strength had already reached the sacred domain. He didn't think that such a small disturbance would actually provoke a powerhouse from the sacred domain. Seeing that person appear, Kadena's body suddenly trembled, and her aura weakened. She didn't dare to look him in the eye. King Doro also saluted. Lord Ram, I didn't think that even you would be alarmed. The person who came was Doro Kingdom's protector, Poison Scorpion Knight Ram, and also Reynolds' father. It was no wonder that Doro Kingdom's king was so polite to him. Basically, Doro Kingdom's fate and safety were tied to Ram. Of course, as a Poison Scorpion Knight, Ram's Poison Scorpion Lion was completely different from the Magic Beast clan's Poison Scorpion Lion. He was riding a Poison Scorpion Lion that he had subdued in another plane. It couldn't speak, couldn't take human form, and didn't have the slightest intelligence. Lord Father, you've come. Reynolds looked as if he had found his savior. Lord Father, what do you think? Ram waved his hand at Reynolds, and arrogantly looked at Kadena. Seeing her standing in front of a human, he understood everything. He frowned. Your Highness Princess Kadena, I have to remind you that since you've chosen to marry my son Reynolds, I hope that you'll be faithful to him till the end. Lord Ram, no, no. Kadena anxiously said. She was just about to refute when Ram interrupted her. Your Highness, I, Ram, have a very good relationship with the royal family of Doro. As an elder, I will only say this much. Take care of yourself. Kadena wanted to defend herself, but Ram didn't give her a chance to explain. King Duoluo was already sweating profusely. At this moment, he didn't know what to do. He wanted to speak up for his daughter, but he was afraid of offending the sacred domain expert Ram. He was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Everyone knew that Ram was famous for his strength. At this moment, Ram turned to Ron. He looked at Ron from head to toe. You're Kadena's classmate, right? Let me remind you to stay away from her. She's now my son Reynolds' fiancée. Lord Father, he's Ron. Reynolds rushed to say, looking at Ron with hatred. He's that heretic Ron who's being hunted down by the Holy See. Heretic? Ram narrowed his eyes, as if remembering something. I know, so it's you. You're the one who got the council to issue a kill order and sent out the law enforcement team. He nodded and continued. Hiding in the Orc Empire is indeed a good choice. No matter how powerful the Holy See is, they can't control the Orc Empire. However, you should hide your head well, otherwise you won't even know how you died. Rory frowned. It seemed that this Lam knew a lot about him. He sneered and said, Haha, Sir Lam, you don't need to worry about this. I've been living well. Ron's rebuttal made Ram lose face. At this moment, the muscles on his face were twitching, full of anger. He was so angry that he laughed. Very well, let me teach you a lesson, you ignorant fool. Ram didn't think it was a big problem to attack a human in the orc's territory. After all, the orc's contempt for humans was deeply ingrained. If it was an orc, he would have to consider it carefully. However, Ram thought that he had a good relationship with the old marshal, so he believed that the old marshal wouldn't blame him for such a small matter. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Why are you all gathered here? Just as Ram was about to make a move, the old marshal quickly walked over and pushed the crowd aside. When he saw Ram, the old marshal couldn't help but be startled. Ram, it's you. What's going on? You're not trying to cause trouble at my birthday party, are you? Ron. What's wrong with you? Are you all right? At this moment, Morin hurried over. She was relieved when she saw that Ron was fine. When he saw the old marshal appear, Ram forced a smile on his face and relaxed his tightly clenched fists. What's wrong? Marshal Jean-Phone, I just wanted to teach this ignorant brat a lesson for you. Since the old marshal doesn't like it, I'll just stop. Who do you want to teach a lesson to? Just as Ram finished speaking, a loud voice suddenly rang out. At this time, the crowd consciously opened up a path, and Li Jia, dressed in casual clothes, slowly walked out. He did not emit the oppressive aura of a realm of the gods' powerhouse, but everyone felt as if there was a heavy stone pressing down on their heads. Following closely behind him was the Beast King Salomon, Prince Dutton, and other important figures of the Orc Empire. Their expressions were extremely ugly. When he saw Ron, Prince Dutton couldn't help but be startled. He saw that he was surrounded by a few beauties, as if they wanted to protect him in the center. Kadina's mesmerizing beauty, Morin's mature charm, Basara's devilish figure, and Raini's innocent face. All of these made Dutton, as a man, jealous from the bottom of his heart. This brat's luck with women was too good, Master Li Jia. Master Li Jia. Everyone present, regardless of whether they were orcs or humans, bowed one after another. They respected this God-realm warrior from the bottom of their hearts. At this moment, Ram felt that something was amiss. The timing of Li Jia's appearance were too unusual. Was he going to back up Ron? Reynolds's face turned pale. Kadina was still confused. She looked at Ron and then at Li Jia, her face full of confusion. Ram's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't believe this. Ron was just a human. Perhaps they don't know Ron's identity. Ram thought. Master Li Jia. Ram put on a fawning smile and bowed slightly. Master Li Jia, please don't be deceived by this human. His name is Ron, and he is a heretic ruled by the council. Without waiting for Ram to finish, Salomon interrupted him. I don't know what heretic. This Ron is from our Orc Empire's golden family. Your Excellency Ram, I hope you can give a golden family the respect they deserve. As soon as these words came out, it was like a heavy bomb that exploded in Ram's head. Not only was Ram shocked, even Reynolds and King Doro had expressions of disbelief. Even Kadina stared at Ron with her beautiful eyes, looking at Ron as if he was a monster. This human was actually from the Golden Family? She had never heard that the title of Golden Family would be given to a human. Feeling Li Jia's protection, Ram felt embarrassed in front of everyone, but he still didn't intend to give up his final effort. Master Li Jia, the council's ruling was made by Deputy Speaker Hao Qin. Then have Hao Qin come find me. Is there anything else? At this time, Li Jia's face had a trace of dissatisfaction, and his stubborn temper surged up. Li Jia was also an influential existence in the council. If he was angry, no one would listen to him. Even Speaker Frigga would give him some leeway. Ram completely understood Li Jia's meaning. He planned to protect Ron to the end. Ram glared at Ron unwillingly and his tone softened. Master Li Jia, this was originally just a misunderstanding. Now that the misunderstanding has been resolved, I will take my leave. Ram lost face in front of everyone, and his heart was filled with resentment. He hurriedly bowed and left. Reynolds stared fiercely at Ron, but Ron's expression was calm, as if it didn't matter to him. No matter how stupid Reynolds was, he could clearly see the situation. Although his father was an expert of the sacred domain, when Li Jia stood there, the entire situation was reversed. Even his father could only admit defeat. King Doro smiled and said, Master Li Jia, then we will take our leave first. Marshal Zhanfeng, we will talk again when we have time, Kadina sighed. She knew that it was time for her to leave. She looked at Ron with a bit of reluctance. She didn't know why, but chatting with Ron for an entire night brought her unprecedented happiness. She enjoyed this feeling very much, and could only sigh that time passed too quickly. She forced a smile and said, Ron, I will be leaving. Okay, goodbye. Ron nodded. He couldn't say anything more. But the moment Reynolds' hand wrapped around Kadina's waist, Ron felt as if something had been ruthlessly stabbed in his heart, and it fiercely twitched. Looking at Kadina's departing figure, Ron's heart was filled with helplessness and disappointment. It was late at night, and Morin took the opportunity to bid farewell to the old marshal. Ron walked up to Li Jia and bowed, thanking him for his support. Everyone stepped onto the returning carriage. How was it? Can't bear to part with your dirty novel, old classmate? On the bumpy carriage, seeing the restless Ron, Molin asked with a smile. She didn't know why, but there was a slight sourness in her nostrils. Ron smiled awkwardly, as if she had seen through his thoughts. Thinking of Kadina's beautiful face, his heart suddenly trembled, and blood rushed to his face. Ron couldn't help but touch his cheek. Just what was wrong with him? She's a very good girl, Ron said with a smile. At this moment, Ron remembered the charming scene of Kadena being drunk and asking him to carry her back to the academy. Those whispers still echoed in his ears. Ron, let me tell you a secret. I've always hoped that my husband would be a noble dragon knight. He was a man of indomitable spirit. He had a head of beautiful golden hair, wore noble armor, and held a long dragon spear in his hand. At my wedding, he rode a huge fire-breathing flying dragon, stepping on a multicolored light as he appeared from the horizon to marry me. Sighing softly, Ron's heart was filled with sympathy for Kadena. He knew that Kadena didn't like Reynolds. From Kadena's attitude towards Reynolds, it could be seen that there was no love in their union, only political factors. Unfortunately, Ron didn't have the ability to do anything for her. To see the first commercial-free article, please go to GrainWeb. Chapter 362. Please remember the domain name of this website, or at GrainWeb Chapter 362. Imena's attack. Tut tut tut, a row of carriages galloped through the streets of the Beastman Empire's imperial capital, Zoomer City. Late at night, the sound of horse hooves sounded particularly crisp. Novel rankings, the swaying magic lampstand illuminated Kadena's face. At this time, Kadena's eyes were staring blankly out of the window, revealing a thoughtful expression. Just as she was about to leave the banquet and step onto the carriage, she had a big quarrel with Reynolds. Originally, she was sitting in Reynolds' carriage, but she ended up in her father's carriage. "My good daughter, what are you thinking about?" King Doro gently stroked Kadena's long hair and said lovingly. King Doro said. He had long ago locked up his wife, Kadena's mother, so he had always doted on Kadena like the apple of his eye, fearing that she would suffer the slightest grievance. Kadena shook her head. "Father, I'm fine, I'm just a little tired today." "Really? Looking at you now, I thought you fell in love with that young man just now. How is it? Are you still thinking about him?" King Doro teased. "Father, you're so bad." Kadena's face flushed red. She said coquettishly, "Ron is my classmate, he's a disgrace to the 56th library." He lost face in front of his son, in front of King Doro. As a powerhouse of the sacred domain, he didn't get the respect he deserved. On that matter, Li Jia clearly stood on the side of that young man who wasn't even 20 years old. Reynolds's anger still hadn't dissipated. He said fiercely, "Humph, father, that young man was too arrogant. He must be taught a lesson." On the surface, he was talking about Ron, but in fact, Reynolds was full of jealousy towards Ron. Not to mention that Kadena was very close to him before, even his fiancée showed a happy expression just now. That's right, Reynolds was jealous. In front of him, Kadena had never shown that kind of sincere happy smile. This was something he absolutely couldn't tolerate. Ram's face was dark and he didn't say anything. If it wasn't for Li Jia's appearance just now, although that kid wouldn't have died, he would have been seriously injured. Damn it. Li Jia. Ram clenched his fists in anger, but he immediately relaxed them in the next moment. As a powerhouse of the realm of the gods, Li Jia was like a huge mountain in his heart, tightly pressing down on his heart, making him unable to move. The gap between a powerhouse from the sacred domain and a powerhouse from the god realm was huge. In this aspect, he would probably never be able to catch up. Seeing that his father didn't say anything, Reynolds was a little discouraged. At this moment, he rolled his eyes and asked tentatively, "Father, can we secretly—" "No!" Without waiting for Reynolds to finish, Ram rudely interrupted him. "Master Lida thinks highly of this kid. You'd better not have these crooked thoughts." Ram paused and said, "I feel that not only Master Lida, but the entire Orc Empire thinks highly of him. We won't gain anything by killing him, but the price we have to pay is not something we can bear." When Reynolds heard this, he was silent. He also knew that it was impossible, but he was unwilling. Kadena's smile in front of Ron was like a knife cutting his heart. Although he could get Kadina's body in the future, he would never allow another man to get her heart. At this time, Reynolds's heart moved, as if he had thought of something. A conspiratorial smile appeared on his face. Father, hasn't the Holy Church always regarded Ron as the biggest heretic? They shouldn't know that Ron is hiding here, so Ron has been so free. I think we should tell them. Ram pondered for a moment. Yes, maybe they won't be a threat, but they can bring trouble to Ron. How about this? Send someone to Mount Hygel tomorrow and tell them that the heretic is here. Yes, Father, Reynolds said with a sinister smile. At this time, Ram's eyebrows twitched slightly. A sense of danger surged in his heart, and all the muscles in his body tensed up. In a flash, a thought flashed through his mind. It's an enemy, and it's a powerhouse from the sacred domain. Ram's eyes suddenly looked out of the window. In the distant sky, a figure stood in the air, exuding a strong aura. At this time, Ram realized that the monstrous aura was not released for him. Who is he? Ram had a question mark in his heart. The person's head was covered by a hood, so no one could see the face clearly. The person stretched out her hand, pulled the belt of her robe, and took off the robe along with the hood, revealing a delicate and beautiful face. Her white robe fluttered in the wind, and the large cross on her chest was eye-catching. With the help of the cold moonlight, Ram finally saw the person's face clearly. It's Emena, priest Emena from the Holy See. The appearance of a human powerhouse from the sacred domain in the sky above Zumur City, the imperial capital of the Orcs, surprised Ram, but on second thought, he already knew the purpose of Emena's appearance here. Father, what's the matter? Reynolds asked. He did not notice Emena's arrival. At this time, he saw a long-lost smile on his father's face. Reynolds, it seems that you don't have to send people to Mount Hygel. As he said that, he pointed to the figure in the sky. What should come has come. Next, let's watch a good show, Ram said with a smile. On another street in Zumur City, the imperial capital of the Orcs, a carriage was speeding along, and the sound of the bells on the carriage broke the silence of the night. Law was lying in the carriage, resting with his eyes closed. He was indeed tired after a tiring day. At this time, Ron suddenly felt his heart palpitating. It was a breath from the Grim Reaper that filled his chest instantly. He opened his eyes abruptly, and his eyes shone brightly. There's an enemy. Just as he finished his sentence, a ball of light in the sky attacked the carriage like a cannonball. Boom! A loud sound was heard. The carriage that Ron was in was torn into pieces, and a large hole appeared on the ground. The fine warhorse that he bought with more than 1,000 gold coins was killed on the spot. At the last moment, a black shadow rushed out of the carriage. Lualua was carrying Rainy in one hand and protecting Inglan with the other. These were the two people closest to him at that time. Basara. Looking at the broken carriage, Ron's heart ached, and he screamed crazily. Crash! A Beaumont came out of the broken carriage. It was Kay who transformed into a Beaumont at the last moment to protect her sister. Although he didn't have any fighting ability, he wouldn't die from a blow when he transformed into a Beaumont. He gestured to Ron that he was fine. Basara was still in shock, and she only felt relieved when she saw Ron. Who is it? Who sneaked an attack on us? Morin was furious. There was actually an assassination in the imperial capital of the Orcs in Zumur City. She planned to have a good talk with the Beast Emperor Salomon tomorrow to restore order in the imperial capital. Morin looked at the sky and saw an unknown human woman. The woman's white clothes were fluttering, and her entire body was emitting a holy and powerful energy. This energy was so strong that it had already reached the sacred domain. A sacred domain expert? Morin's eyes widened. Who are you? Why did you sneak an attack on us? Morin recovered from her shock and suspected that the other party had mistaken her for someone else. May. Nah, when Ron saw Emena, his entire body froze, and his body trembled involuntarily. Fear and hatred intertwined, biting his heart like worms. He would always remember that it was because of their arrival that Grandfather Homelin fell into a deep sleep and might never wake up. Ron's gaze towards Imena was filled with bone-deep hatred. Ron, do you know who she is? Morin then realized that the woman came for Ron. The Holy See, Ron said through gritted teeth, his body trembling with fear. The Holy See? Morin understood everything at this time. This woman was from the Holy See, and the reason she appeared was because her target was Ron, whom they thought was a heretic. Ron, I finally found you. Imena sneered, her beautiful eyes filled with strong killing intent. You think you'll be fine hiding in the Orc Empire? Haha. Today is the day you die. Chapter 363. After Imena finished speaking, the scepter in her hand glowed brightly. At that moment, an overwhelming pressure came pressing down. Holy light ball! It came crashing down with the sound of the wind. Look! The goddess in the sky came for revenge. Protective shield, Morin shouted coldly and raised the great sorcerer's defensive skill, protective shield. Her body glowed, and at that moment, a transparent shield covered Ron and the three of them tightly. Boom! The holy light ball hit the transparent shield, causing it to vibrate. Although the shield didn't break, the three of them slipped and sank into it. As if she was hit by Imena's attack, Morin spat out a mouthful of blood. The fresh red blood stained her white sorcerer's robe. With just one attack, Morin was severely injured. Ron's eyes were red. Morin! Sister Morin! Rainey exclaimed. Ron supported Morin's delicate body. Morin! Morin, are you okay? At that moment, Morin's eyes were tightly shut. Her face was as white as a sheet, and her breathing was weak. It seemed like her body was severely injured. Imena frowned. A great sorcerer actually blocked my attack. The orcs are indeed a fighting race. Damn it! Ron put down Morin's body and slowly raised his head. His bright red eyes stared at Imena as if they were bleeding. He clenched his fists and suddenly shouted, I'll fight it out with you. He took a step forward, and a large amount of black fog gathered in front of him. Not long later, a gargoyle appeared in front of Ron. Without thinking, Ron stretched out his hand, and a green-white bone spear appeared in his hand. He stepped on it and stood on the gargoyle's back. The gargoyle flapped its wings and rushed towards Imena with a gust of wind. Bone-deep hatred shot out of Ron's eyes. Right now, he was so angry that he lost his mind. Tonight, he was going to take revenge for Merlin's grandpa and Molin. He was going to settle the score with the Holy Church. In a small alley in Zummer City, the carriage of the Doro Empire was parked at the side. Ram and Reynolds alighted from the carriage and quietly watched the battle in the distance with a mocking smile on their faces. Ram smiled and said, in front of a powerful being from the sacred domain, everyone's strength is as insignificant as a grain of rice. Ron, you don't stand a chance. He actually launched a charge towards a powerful being from the sacred domain. He's really courting death. Reynolds gloated. Today is really lucky to be able to see the scene of his death. Reynolds's face was full of hatred. No one wanted Ron to die more than him. You actually dare to charge? Imena frowned and sneered. Your courage is commendable. Unfortunately, the difference in strength makes your risky actions meaningless. Boom! Boom! The scepter and the bone spear collided, and a huge force erupted. Ron only felt his breath stop, and a powerful aura rushed towards him, almost making it difficult for him to breathe. Soul ignition, Ron's eyes turned green, and a powerful soul force erupted like a mountain. Facing a powerful being from the sacred domain, he did not retreat a single step. The gargoyle flapped its huge bone wings and fought with Imena in the sky. Black gas and white light intertwined with each other, and a loud noise exploded. The calm night sky was agitated, and even the earth began to shake. The Orc Emperor's capital, Zummer City, seemed to have been awakened. Many orcs ran out to the streets and looked at the fierce battle in the sky. Oh my God, that's a powerful being from the sacred domain. And she's a human, pornographic novel, she's very powerful. Are there such powerful beings among humans? The beast men began to discuss among themselves. They were amazed by Imena's strength. In their impression, humans should be a weak race. Basara, Rainey, and Kay retreated to the side. Kay had already transformed back into her human form and was guarding the group of women. "How's Miss Morin?" Basara asked anxiously. "She's fine. She fainted." Rainey checked Morin's body. What should we do now? Kay. Basara was out of her wits. "There's no other way. The only thing we can do is pray." Kay sighed. Even if he could fly, he would not be Imena's opponent. The strength of a powerful being from the sacred domain was too scary. Kadena also saw the scene in the sky from the window. She was stunned. The undead creature flapping its wings was filled with a strong aura of death. Coupled with the small figure, she already knew who it was even though she could not see clearly. He's Ron. Kadena screamed crazily and rushed out. "What are you going to do?" King Duoluo saw that something was wrong and pulled her back. I'm going to help him." Kadena had already taken out her staff. "Are you crazy? That person is a powerful being from the sacred domain." King Duoluo scolded loudly. "You're not helping him. You're courting death." Kadena was speechless. She held her staff and stood there in a daze. Seeing that his scolding was effective, King Duoluo heaved a sigh of relief. "Don't worry. This battle against Ron won't last long. The powerful beings from the Beastman Empire will be here soon." "Really?" Kadena's eyes lit up with hope. King Duoluo nodded. However, there was one thing he did not tell his daughter. He did not know if Ron could hold on until then. Ron, who was in the sky, rode on the gargoyle and charged towards Imena again and again like a warrior who was ready to die. At this moment, Kadena's heart felt like it was being stabbed. Unknowingly, tears blurred her eyes. How is this possible? As the battle unfolded, Imena's brows wrinkled. She suddenly discovered that Ron's strength had risen a lot compared to before. He was approaching the realm of a master-rank powerhouse. Imena took a deep breath. He had actually made so much progress in just a few months. A 19-year-old master-rank powerhouse. Just thinking about it was terrifying. If he was allowed to continue growing, Imena was familiar with the legends of necromancy. These were all things recorded in the top-secret books of the Holy See. Thinking that Ron might set foot in the sacred domain in the future and even threaten the Holy See, Imena shuddered. "No. I can't let him continue to progress like this. Ron must die tonight." Imena's eyes flashed with intense killing intent. She also realized that the battle could not be dragged on. This was the imperial capital of the Beastman Empire. There was no lack of Beastman powerhouses. Sacred light. Imena raised her dark gold staff and shouted. In an instant, 10,000 rays of golden light sprinkled down. Boom! Ron's body suffered a heavy blow. The gargoyle under his feet melted like snow under the illumination of the light, turning into a cloud of black mist and disappearing. Ron's body fell down like a kite with a broken string. Ron! Several anxious voices sounded from different places. One side was from Basara, Xiaoyu, and the others, while the other side was from Kadena. Seeing this, King Doro sighed slightly. Seeing his daughter's appearance, he more or less understood something. With just one blow, Ron's defense collapsed, and he fell heavily from the air to the ground. 3 minutes, only 3 minutes. Ron went all out and used soul ignition, but he could only hold on for 3 minutes. The strength of a powerhouse of the sacred domain was too strong. "Ron, go to hell." Imena's face was full of coldness. She decided not to delay any longer. She raised her staff and a huge ball of light smashed towards Ron. "Wharton, I've finally avenged you." the powerful holy ball illuminated the entire sky. When the ball of light fell, it announced Ron's death. Ron struggled to move his body, but all the bones in his body seemed to have fallen apart. He found that his body had no strength left. Am I going to die? As expected, I'm still unwilling. The ball of light illuminated his face. At this moment, Ron's face was filled with an intense expression of unwillingness. He was unwilling to die like this. All his efforts would be for naught, and necromancy magic would become history once again. Just as Ron was in despair, the ball of light in the sky suddenly shook and exploded with a boom. At the last moment, someone saved him. Who? Who is it? Who dares to interfere with the matters of the Holy See? Seeing that Ron was about to die, but in the end all her efforts were for naught, Emena instantly went crazy and shouted loudly. She looked around, but did not see half a shadow. Leave, this isn't a place you should be. At this moment, a dull voice sounded in Emena's ears, as if it came from the horizon. Emena desperately used her spiritual sense to search, but still did not see anyone. Emena's gaze fell on the injured Ron, and a trace of a fierce glint appeared in her eyes. Who cares who he is, let's kill Ron first. She raised her scepter, and a beam of light blasted towards Ron. Its speed was twice as fast as the previous ball of light. This attack was meant to be a sneak attack. No matter who it was, she decided to kill Ron first. Boom! Emena's body suddenly shook, and her face revealed an expression of disbelief. Her attack had just been released, but it had already collapsed. Following that, her body felt pain, and she spat out a large mouthful of blood with a "was" sound. In the blink of an eye, Emena had been seriously injured. You? Who are you? Emena's body trembled. She knew that she had provoked a terrifying existence. What made her feel slightly relieved was that this terrifying existence did not seem to want to take her life. Otherwise, she would have died from that attack just now. That person's strength was not something she could imagine. A thin figure slowly appeared in front of Emena. His face did not reveal any expression, and he looked at her indifferently. It's you. Emena's body shook. Seeing the person who had come, her face turned ashen. It really is you. Perhaps I should have thought of it earlier. The person who had come was Li Jia. Although he did not make any promises to Ron, he still came and stopped Emena from killing Ron. What? Ram's body shook. Li Jia actually came personally? It can't be. Reynolds's eyes flashed with intense disbelief. Ron, that brat, actually alarmed Li Jia. Emena calmed down, took a deep breath, and said in a clear voice, Lord Senator, I'm very sorry to have disturbed you. I didn't mean to cause trouble in the Beastman Empire. I think you also know the resolution of the Assembly. The person I want to kill is Ron, who is being chased by the Assembly. Li Jia, I hope you won't make things difficult for me. Emena had no choice but to mention the Assembly, hoping that Li Jia would give her some convenience for the sake of the Assembly. Li Jia smiled and said indifferently, The Assembly's resolution is to restrain you sacred domain powerhouses. It has no binding effect on us. Leave here, human sacred domain powerhouses from the human world. You are not welcome here. In addition, I hate it when people use the Assembly's resolution to talk about things. Li Jia's words were full of dominance. This was because he had the qualifications to say these words as a sacred domain powerhouse. Emena was slightly stunned. She already understood that Li Jia was going to protect this brat to the end. Damn it, when did Ron, this brat, get on Li Jia's side? This is not a good thing. Emena's heart was filled with hatred for Ron. However, with Li Jia here, there was nothing she could do. She could only sigh at this brat's good luck. Emena bit her lips and said unwillingly, If that's the case, Emena will take her leave. Finishing her sentence, she turned and left without another word. Few, seeing that the matter was settled, Basara, Rainy, and the rest looked at each other and smiled. They all heaved a sigh of relief at the same time. On the other side, Kadina's tensed heart was finally at ease. She followed her father into the carriage. In the corner, the Doro Empire's carriage started moving again. In the carriage, Ram and Reynolds were both silent for a long time, not saying a word. Li Jia seems to value this brat quite a lot. Looks like we can't touch him for the time being. At this time, Ram took a deep breath and said. His face was filled with regret, but he still didn't dare to go against Li Jia. Humph! I hope this brat doesn't fall into my hands. Reynolds's eyes were burning with anger. Seeing Imena's back disappear into the horizon, Li Jia then retracted his gaze and looked at the ground. At this moment, Ron's body was covered with injuries. He didn't know when he fainted, but luckily, his life wasn't in danger. Hee, what an interesting brat. A smile hung on the corner of Li Jia's mouth. He raised his head slightly and looked at the distant horizon. He muttered, I've already fulfilled my promise to you. I also hope that you won't forget your promise to me. Chapter 364. Mount Hygel was covered with ice and snow all year round. As it was winter, the cold wind was even more bitterly cold. When the wind blew on one's face, it was as painful as a knife. Outside the solemn and magnificent Hall of Redemption, a figure came from afar. Who is it? Stop right there. Several loyal guards outside the front door of the Hall of Redemption immediately shouted as soon as they saw the figure. The long spears in their hands were pointed forward with a murderous look. The person seemed to have not heard them and gradually approached, revealing a delicate and peerless face. When the guards saw her, they were shocked and immediately knelt down on one knee to salute. Lady Imena, you're back. The person who came was Imena. She had returned to Mount Hygel from the Orc Empire and was travel-worn. At this moment, Imena was obviously in a bad mood. She glanced at the guards and only nodded softly before she walked into the hall. The guards looked at each other. Seeing that their lord of the temple was in a bad mood, they did not want to go forward and provoke her and become the target of her venting. One of the guards gave another a look, and that person shook his head. Imena sensitively noticed the movement behind her and slowly turned her head. Is there anything? Left with no choice, one of the guards boldly said, Lady Imena, while you were away, His Majesty Pope ordered that if you come back, please make a trip to the Hall of God's Prophecy. His Majesty Pope? Why is he looking for me? Imena frowned. Lord of the Temple, I don't know. Imena nodded faintly. I know, I'll be there in a while. In the Hall of God's Arrow, Pope Ernst heard the news of Imena's return, and his face was full of smiles. Imena, you're back. Pope Ernst smiled kindly. May God bless you, my child. His Majesty Pope. Imena bowed deeply and drew a cross in front of her chest. The cross was the unique symbol of the Holy See. I'm sorry, Lord Pope. I failed to live up to your expectations. Imena's face was filled with disappointment. I met the heretic Ron in the Orc Empire. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to kill him. Pope was even more surprised when he heard this. How can that be? With your strength, killing him should be a piece of cake. That is indeed the case, but... Imena raised her head. Senator Liga of the Orcs intervened. What? Strength plus? Pope Ernst was shocked. He stood up and lost his composure. The Holy See has no conflict with the people of Strength University. Why would they interfere in our affairs? I don't know, but he clearly warned me not to kill Ron. Imena told the whole story to Pope. After hearing this, Pope's face darkened. Imena said, Imena was incompetent. Please punish me, His Majesty Pope. The Pope took a deep breath. Even the Master of Might has intervened. This is going to be a little difficult to handle. Looking at the apologetic Imena, Pope sighed and waved his hand. Forget it. This has nothing to do with you. I don't know about others, but you. I believe you've done your best. Imena's expression was gloomy. She had traveled through most of the Noah continent in search of Ron's relic. Everything she had done was to avenge her lover, Wharton. Finally, she found her target in the Orc Empire. But because of Strength University's intervention, it was all for naught. Imena's heart was filled with regret. At this time, Imena said solemnly, Lord Pope, I think we have to take action against Ron no matter what. In just a few months, I found that his strength is growing rapidly. If we don't control it, maybe one day, he will become a big problem for us, Pope sighed. Let's talk about this later. Imena, I called you back so urgently because there's a matter of 100,000 fire gold. Sigh, I can't explain it clearly now. Come with me. Pope and Ernst looked quite troubled. Imena nodded. With a trace of confusion, she followed Pope out of the Palace of God's Word. The two of them did not bring a single guard. They flew straight up and flew to another peak of Mount Hygel. Not long after, the two of them slowly landed in front of a dilapidated temple halfway up the mountain. Imena remembered that this place had been abandoned for a long time. Boom! A dull roar came from the dilapidated temple, as if a ferocious beast was roaring inside. It was accompanied by a powerful force that surged out. This is, Imena's expression changed slightly. The strength of this force was far beyond her imagination. At the same time, she faintly felt that this force was very familiar. What's inside? A trace of fear appeared on Imena's face. She felt that this force was much more terrifying than Ligia. This guy is causing trouble again. Pope and Ernst's faces were full of helplessness. They glanced at Imena and said, Let's go in. The two of them slowly walked into the abandoned temple. Pope came in front of a huge white jade pillar and pressed on it. Zap! 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 There was a mechanical sound, and a passage appeared in front of the statue in the temple. Ernst walked into the black passage. After a while, the two of them came to a room. Seeing the scene in front of her, Imena's expression suddenly froze. She finally saw the owner of that turbulent force. A headless corpse. It was trapped in a magic array, constantly twisting and struggling. Traces of destructive power seeped out from its body and intertwined with the power of the magic array, producing dull sounds. Imena, you're back, a surprised voice said. At this time, Imena noticed that there was another person in the room. It was the Hall Master of the Hall of Judgment, Judge Guangming Nord. I just came back. Imena nodded and said. She pointed at the headless corpse and said, What's going on? Isn't this Ron's battle puppet? Wasn't it destroyed in the battle? Why is it here? Imena's eyes were filled with confusion and confusion. It's a long story, Pope said with a bitter smile. I'm also regretting bringing it back. The Pope then recounted the events that had transpired. You're saying? Imena's eyes widened. This is the corpse of a god? That's right. Judge Guangming Nord said. When I first brought it back, I didn't dare to believe it either. But it does indeed have destructive divine power. It's the corpse of a god. Imena frowned. So, Your Majesty Pope, you want to bring it here and control it like Ron? Of course. Pope's eyes revealed a trace of surprise. Don't forget, it's a god. The power of a god is not something you can imagine. It's also an incomplete god. Once we control a god. Pope's eyes lit up. Then, no one in the whole continent will be a match for our holy see. Even if only half of them are here, we can still fight for a place in the Noah continent. In front of the two, Ernst did not hide his naked ambition. But the result can't be controlled, can it? Imena said faintly, Sorry, Your Majesty Pope, Your Honor. Imena admits that the ideal is indeed tempting, but I don't agree with your approach. Controlling this corpse to fight is no different from Ron, a heretic. Ernst and Nord's expressions were a little awkward. Imena's words were impeccable, and they could not come up with any excuses to refute. Pope and Ernst waved their hands. These are all trivial matters. In order to achieve the goal, the means are not important. Besides, it's too late to talk about this now. Ever since we brought it back, this fellow was still fine at first, and had been in a deep slumber. Later on, for some reason, it suddenly woke up and released a destructive force, causing destruction everywhere in Mount Hyjal. The few of us sanctuary powerhouses worked together to defeat it, and we had no choice but to use this magical formation to seal it, Pope said with lingering fear. Fortunately, its power was not fully awakened. Otherwise, none of us would have survived, Judge Nord said. But after a while, it woke up again and attacked our seal. The seal began to loosen, so we strengthened the power of the seal and let it continue to sleep. Imena pondered for a while and was finally convinced. She raised her beautiful eyes. Your Majesty Pope, Your Honor, what do you want me to do? We need your power, to be precise. We need the power of a few sanctuary powerhouses to inject into the magic formation to maintain the seal. Otherwise, once this guy breaks through the seal and comes out with his powerful destructive divine power, not only will Mount Hyjal be destroyed, but even the entire Noah continent will be plunged into misery and suffering. This is because no powerhouse can contend with the existence of a god, not even Speaker Freya. The Pope smiled and continued, this is because no powerhouse can contend with the existence of a god. Imena nodded her head. I know what to do. The three of them stood in their respective positions and pressed their hands on the array eye of the magic formation, slowly injecting their power. At this time, the magic formation lit up, illuminating the entire room as if it was daytime. Not long later, the struggling headless corpse finally calmed down and fell into a deep sleep again. Orc Emperor's capital, Zumur City, Ron's house. Ron was sitting cross-legged on the bed, slowly entering into a state of cultivation. Morin had returned to the Thorny Flower tribe, and he had fewer social engagements. Finally, he had time to cultivate alone. Brother Ron! Brother Ron! A voice broke the silence of the house. Needless to say, it was Rainy, the troublemaker. What's wrong? Ron woke up from his cultivation state helplessly. Bang! The door was pushed open, and a black-faced Rainy appeared in front of Ron as if she had crawled out from a pile of coal. Ron took a look and was shocked. What happened? Brother Ron, I was careless and didn't handle it well. The experimental medicine exploded. Rainy's face was full of apology. And those materials were all burned. If it's burned, so be it. To be honest, Ron's heart ached a little. Those materials cost a lot, but thinking about how he had enough money now, this amount of money was nothing. Go get some money from Becerra and buy it with K. Oh, do you still remember the prescription? Chapter 365. Rainy washed her face and walked out of the house to see that Becerra and Kay had gone out. Ron had no choice but to stop cultivating and go out with Rainy to buy ingredient. Half an hour later, Ron and Rainy appeared in the biggest ingredient store in Zumur City. What? You said there's no more moon spring water? Rainy widened her eyes in shock. I came here to buy it half a month ago. Rainy had basically bought all the ingredients for the stamina potion, but there was only one thing left: the moon spring water. The chubby shop owner spread his hands. Yes, it was half a month ago. During this period of time, the supply of moon spring water has been decreasing, and the price has been increasing. Now, even if you have money, you can't buy it anymore. Then, what should we do? Rainy turned and asked Ron. Ron thought for a while. Let's go to other shops to look for it. The two of them went to all the ingredient stores in Zumur City, but the results were very disappointing because all of them had the same answer: none. No way, there's actually no more moon spring water in the entire city? Standing at the corner of the street, Ron's face was full of disbelief as he asked Rainy, "This isn't considered too expensive, right? It's considered a middle-grade material, but it's quite expensive." Rainy said dejectedly, "Now, even if you have money, you can't buy it. I need this material to concoct the stamina potion. What should we do now? Can't we use other materials to replace it? Ron asked. This can't be. Rainey shook her head. What she meant was that other materials might be possible, but the moon's spring water was absolutely irreplaceable. Luo sighed. There's no other way. Perhaps we should go to Banner City tomorrow to take a look. The next day before dawn, Ron, Rainey, Becerra, and Kay woke up early and stood in the courtyard. Ron mumbled something, and not long after, 4 ferocious-looking gargoyles appeared in front of everyone. Let's go, Ron said and stepped onto the gargoyle's back. Rainey, Becerra, and Kay imitated Ron and climbed onto the gargoyle's back. Not long after, the 4 gargoyles rushed into the sky. Rainey, who was flying for the first time, was a little nervous. Brother Ron, this thing is quite convenient. Ron smiled. It's quite convenient, but it's a little slow. But I already feel it, Rainey said excitedly. And then she added, at least the effect of the 56 books. Rainey's eyes widened. If that was the case, wouldn't the moon's spring water have the same effect as the most expensive recovery medicine? It was equivalent to a mixture of life medicine and magic medicine. That. The shop owner smiled. Of course, this is just a legend. In reality, the gargoyle's water doesn't have such an effect. Including the stuff we bought directly from the Elven Empire, it's just a normal material. Ron nodded. It seems like we can only go to the Elven Empire to take a look. Not long after, outside Banner City, 4 gargoyles rushed into the sky and left Banner City. Kay, have you heard of the Elven race? Ron asked Kay in the sky, facing the whistling wind. Kay nodded. The Elven race. I heard my father talk about it before. He thought for a while and said, I don't know much about the Elven race. I only know that they are a noble race. They worship nature, love peace, and dislike fighting. They don't like to interact with outsiders, but they are extremely talented in battle and magic. 3 days later, Ron and the rest arrived at a teleportation point. With a flash of light, they had arrived at the Elven Empire. This was the city of the Elven Empire, Sui Yi City. Compared to the bustling human world and the luxurious Orc Empire, the Elven Empire was like a pornographic novel. It was calm and monotonous. Unlike other races, the elves were arrogant and closed off. They didn't like to communicate and get along with other races. They only liked to stay in the Elven Forest. Some elves didn't even take a step into the Elven Forest. The vast Elven Forest had nurtured this group of nature's favorites for 100,000 years. The so-called Elven Empire was composed of the Elven Forest and the surrounding cities. The surrounding cities were built based on the Elven Forest. Although these cities were nominally part of the Elven Empire's territory, in fact, many elves didn't treat these cities as territories. They only treated them as buffer zones to deal with the invasion of foreign forces. They didn't even send people to manage them. With the Elven Forest behind them, these cities became models of self-governance. The mayor and security officers of the cities were elected. It was quite democratic. Looking at the pot-bellied security officers on the streets, if anyone thought that they could cause trouble here, they would be sorely mistaken. Although the security officers here weren't very powerful, they were backed by the powerful elves. If there was a problem, these elves would always be happy to help. They wouldn't allow any foreign forces to disrupt the order of the buffer zone. Once, a group of bandits saw that the security of Sui Yi City was lax. They thought that they could take advantage of this opportunity and led their men to rob Sui Yi City. However, in less than half a day, the Elven Forest's huntresses were mobilized. These female elves rode on black panthers and held crescent blades in their hands. They rushed to Sui Yi City as fast as lightning and ended the battle in just half an hour. None of the bandits were spared. All their heads were hung on the city gate, announcing their defeat to the world. This showed how powerful the elves were. Chapter 366. What? You're saying you don't have any more moon spring water here? Ron's eyes widened and his face was filled with shock. Even the place of origin was gone. What was going on? The manager of the material store, who was in charge of receiving Ron, was a kind-looking middle-aged woman. Looking at the anxious looks on Ron's face, she said regretfully, "I'm very sorry, we really don't have any more here. What's going on? Could it be that the elves' moon well doesn't produce moon spring water anymore?" Rainey asked. Underworld novel. Net of grains. The middle-aged woman looked at her in surprise, thinking that not many people knew about the origin of the moon spring water. She shook her head and said, "I don't know about this either. The elves who came to deliver the moon spring water didn't come either. Usually, they would deliver it on time." The three of them walked out of the material store and asked a few shops, but they all had the same answer. Everyone was a little depressed. Among them, Rainey sighed and said, "Brother Ron, what should we do? Without the moon spring water, I can't concoct the body medicine." "Sigh, I'm just one step away," Ron sighed and said, "Let's go to the elf forest and see if they can sell some moon spring water to us." There was no broad road, only a small path that was about 2 meters wide. This was the only way into the elf forest. Ron led Rainey, Becerra, and Kay into the forest. The huge forest covered the sky, and every tree was like a pillar that pierced through the clouds. The sun shone through the trees and onto the ground, sprinkling bits of starlight. Ron and the rest walked forward. The further they walked, the narrower the path became. In the end, there was no path at all. Everywhere they went, there were only knee-deep leaves. "The trees here are really big." Rainey sighed as she walked with difficulty. Becerra was not used to walking long distances. Not long after, a few blisters formed on her feet. Every step she took hurt. "Becerra, I didn't think it through. Let me carry you," Ron said apologetically. If he had known, he wouldn't have let Becerra follow. Becerra rejected at first, but she agreed in the end. Her face was red as she lay on Ron's back shyly. At this time, Kay seemed to have thought of something and shouted, "Brother Ron, I remember now. The elves are very closed and stubborn. They usually don't leave the elf forest, and at the same time, they don't welcome other races' entry into their territory. If we come in like this, we might encounter some trouble. Since we're already here, let's go in and take a look. I've heard that the elves are friendly races, and we don't have any ill intentions. I don't think they'll make things difficult for us. At worst, they won't sell us the moon spring water and we'll just leave." They walked all the way, and after noon, they were already sweating profusely. As they walked, Ron's heart sank. He suddenly felt a murderous intent lock on to them. In the blink of an eye, a whoosh sound was heard as an arrow flew out from the side and struck a nearby tree. The arrow's body was still trembling incessantly. "Be careful," Ron cried out. He immediately took out a weapon from his space bag. It was an orange staff. He said warily, Who's attacking us?" Ron knew that this arrow was not an attack, but a warning. If the other party wanted to attack them, this arrow would not be aimed at the tree. It would be aimed at one of their heads. He deliberately said this to lure that person out. If Ron's guess was right, that person was definitely a legendary elf. But it was not. A cold voice sounded. If I really wanted to attack you, you would be dead by now." They looked in the direction of the voice and saw a figure slowly appear on the top of a tree. That person was holding a bow, and her waist was full of arrows. The bowstring was still trembling. It was obvious that she was the one who shot the arrow. An elf. Seeing the figure on the top of the tree, everyone was shocked. It was a female elf. She was wearing a dark green light armor and tall boot. She was not eye-catching in the forest. She was thin and looked very agile. Unlike humans, she had a pair of long ears that were gently shaking. A pair of blue eyes was coldly looking at them. She was a night elf archer, a member of the night elf clan. Legend had it that they were born with the ability to conceal themselves. This is an elf? Sure enough, No wonder the book said that all of them were handsome men and beautiful women. Ron sighed in his heart. From a human's point of view, the elves were all good-looking. The men were handsome, and the women were beautiful. It was as if there was no ugly elf in the entire elf race. They could not be compared to the dark and clumsy orc men. So this is an elf. She is indeed beautiful, Rainey said innocently. When the female dark elf heard that, her face turned red, but she immediately returned to normal. She coldly said, "Go back, humans. The elf forest is not a place for you to come. Leave immediately. Otherwise, the next arrow will not be as simple as a warning. It is said that the elves are extremely conservative and closed off. They really won't allow us to enter," Ron thought in his heart. At this moment, he revealed a kind smile. "Respected elves, I did not mean to offend you. We came here with no ill intentions. We only hope to buy some moon spring water. The outer cities of the elf kingdom are no longer for sale, and we are in urgent need of this item. I hope you can make an exception and make things easier for us." The female dark elf ignored Ron's request. Her eyes were cold as she looked at them. "I don't care about the moon spring water. Leave the elf forest quickly. Otherwise, I won't be polite," Rainey said. "Sister elf, please sell us some. We won't take it for free. How much do you want?" "Just tell us, respected elf, if you don't want us to enter the elf forest, then we will wait here." Ron helped. His intuition told him that this elf's strength was not simple. Moreover, they were in the other party's territory. If he could get the moon spring water, he did not want to waste too much time here. The female elf's face turned cold, as if she did not hear their words. "Since you insist on not leaving, then I have nothing more to say. Die!" She attacked as soon as she said so. At this moment, she suddenly pulled out an arrow from her waist, knocked it, and pulled the bow into a full moon. She then shot the arrow towards Rainey with great magical power. "Be careful!" Ron exclaimed. His body moved quickly and blocked in front of Rainey. At the same time, he summoned his bone shield. Boom! Smoke filled the air. Ron's bone shield successfully blocked the arrow shot by the female elf. Rainey, Becerra, and Kay were so scared that their faces turned white. "Be careful. Everyone, hide behind me," Ron said loudly. At this time, his eyes were fixed on the female elf. His heart was filled with anger as he said hatefully, "They are just children who do not know anything. How dare you kill them? Anyone who enters the elf forest is an enemy." The female elf shouted. At the same time, she knocked an arrow on her bow even faster. Boom! 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 Magical arrows shot towards them. These arrows seemed to have eyes as they attacked from all angles. Bone shield. Ron calmed down and waved his bone shield up and down, blocking all the arrows. When the female elf made her move, Ron knew that her strength had reached the level of an archery master. Indeed, the elves are not simple. Any random elf we meet is an archery master, Ron thought. Damn it! The female elf's heart was filled with anger as she missed her target. She only felt that the youth in front of her was strange, but he was also very strong. Until now, she had not even figured out what his occupation was. "Go to hell," the female elf said through gritted teeth. She knocked an arrow on her bow. Powerful magical elements gathered, and the tip of the arrow glowed. No, I can't let her go on like this. Ron knew that if he defended for too long, he would definitely lose. Besides, this arrow was not that easy to block. He gritted his teeth, and his eyes shone brightly. The high-level necromancer sorcerer's spell, Spiritual Pain, was cast. Ah! At this time, the female elf's body seemed to have been struck by lightning. There was a sweet taste in her throat, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. The magical arrow was forcefully interrupted. At this time, her expression changed drastically as she looked at Ron in disbelief. Spiritual attack? Who are you? After taking a deep breath, Ron calmed down. At this time, he stopped. Honorable elf, Who I am is not important. What's important is that we have no evil intentions. I just want to get a little of the moon's spring water. Just a little is enough. Once we get it, we will leave immediately." When the female elf heard this, she did not say a word and lowered her head. Rainy, Basara, and the rest heaved a sigh of relief. They finally managed to intimidate this elf. Their request was not too much. As long as they talked nicely, they could still get the moon's spring water. Just when everyone thought that the female elf would agree, she suddenly pulled out an arrow from her waist and raised the longbow in her hand. When Ron saw this, his relaxed heart tensed up again. Be careful. However, this time, the female elf's arrow was not aimed at them but at the sky. Hiss! A whistling arrow flew into the sky in a parabola, and the sharp sound pierced through everyone's ears. Not good! Kay exclaimed. She's calling for reinforcements. As expected, Kay was right. Not long later, there was a commotion in the surrounding forest as if something was approaching. There were a lot of them. Not good. Ron knew that things were not going well. He shouted, "Let's get out of here, quickly. You want to leave now?" The female elf's face was filled with a cold smile. "It's too late." Huff, huff, huff. Pornographic novels. Not long after, dozens of figures darted out of the woods and surrounded them all at once. Go to Grain Web to see the first commercial-free episode. Chapter 367. Roar! A beastly roar was heard as a group of night elves appeared in front of Ron. They looked similar to the female elf from before, but the difference was that they were riding on black panthers. They were constantly roaring and holding huge crescent blades in their hands. The edges of the crescent blades were flashing with a cold light. Net of grains, they were the huntresses of the night elf race. They had strong defense and were as fast as the wind. They could travel through the forest without any obstacles. When the female elf saw the reinforcements, she was instantly energized. "Sister Nandi, these humans want to barge into the elf forest. I'm not their match. Hurry up and catch them." The leader of the night elves frowned slightly. She was the Sister Nandi that the female elf had mentioned. She waved her moonblade. "Humans, how dare you barge into the elf forest? Don't you know that outsiders are not allowed in the elf forest?" Facing the huge black panthers, Basara and Rainy took a step back and hid behind Ron. They were so scared that their faces turned pale. Kay, who didn't have much combat power, was so scared that her legs were trembling. Although Ron wasn't afraid of these huntresses, he had to think about the safety of Basara and the rest. They, including Kay, didn't have any combat power. If there was a conflict, he would definitely be at a disadvantage. Ron sighed before smiling and saying, "Respected elves, this is definitely a misunderstanding. I have no intention of becoming your enemy. I only came to the elven forest to obtain a small amount of moon spring water. I hope you can sell the moon spring water to us, and we will immediately leave." Ron had no choice but to repeat his words. He wanted to gain the understanding of these night elves. The moon spring water wasn't something rare, especially to these elves. They usually sold it. After hearing Ron's intentions, the huntress's expressions softened. "Moon spring water?" The huntress named Nandi frowned and said to them in an unquestionable tone, "I'm sorry, everyone. The moon spring water will not be for sale in the near future. Please go back." "What?" Ron and Rainy were both shocked. They looked at each other, not expecting this result. Ron asked, "Is the moon spring water not for sale?" "Why?" "This involves a secret of our elven race, so it's not convenient for us to disclose it to the public. Please understand," Nandi said coldly. Although her tone was very polite, her meaning was not negotiable. "Then, when will we continue to sell the moon's spring water?" Rainy was very smart. She caught on to the word "soon" that Nandi mentioned. Nandi said, "That's hard to say. It depends on when the trouble of our elven race will be solved." "Trouble? Ron finally understood why the elven huntress didn't sell the moon's spring water. It was because the elves were in trouble. Only then did Nandi realize that she had said too much. Her face darkened as she said, "I'm sorry, everyone. There are some secrets that cannot be told to outsiders." At this time, her face became serious. "Humans, if you don't have anything else, please leave. Otherwise, we will arrest you for trespassing. However, seeing that you don't know anything and that this is your first offense, we will let you go. However, you must leave immediately," Nandi said coldly. Ron originally wanted to ask what kind of trouble it was, or if there was anything he could help with, or if it would be easier for him to ask for the moon's spring water after he helped. However, after hearing Nandi's words, he swallowed the words that were at the tip of his tongue. Ron cursed himself for being stupid. How could these isolated elves trust a human? Besides, the elven race was full of powerhouses. Who knew how many saint-level powerhouses there were? Why would they need the help of an outsider? However, this huntress named Nandi was still very nice. She didn't make things difficult for them and only invited them out of the elf forest. Nandi rode her black panther in front, and the group of female elves walked behind her, sandwiching Ron and the rest in the middle. They walked out of the elf forest as if they were escorting criminals. After a few hours of twists and turns, they arrived at the small path that they used to enter the elf forest. "All right, we'll leave you here," the huntress Nandi said as she tightened her grip on the black panther beneath her. She glanced at Ron and the others and said in a clear voice, "I'll give you one last warning. The elven forest does not welcome outsiders. If there's a next time, I won't hold back." After she finished speaking, she led her Black Panther team back and disappeared into the elf forest in a short while. "Brother Ron, what should we do now?" Rainey asked dejectedly. "We have no choice but to go back." Ron shrugged his shoulders. Although the female hunters couldn't see them, he felt that they were still watching them. Moreover, the elf forest was too big. Ron didn't think that he could find what he wanted without alerting the female hunters. Without a map, he didn't even know where the elf village was. Ron and the rest returned to the teleportation point again. This time, they came out empty-handed. Everyone was a little depressed, and Rainey couldn't lift her spirit. She was determined to be a pharmacist and make strength potions for Brother Ron. Unfortunately, she could only wait now. "Brother Ron, look, there are so many people." Rainey opened her mouth wide and said exaggeratedly. She pointed at the teleportation point and said to Ron. Ron looked up and saw that the teleportation point in front of them had become a sea of people. It was completely surrounded, and those people were desperately trying to squeeze forward. The situation was a little chaotic. There were still some people in line. Unfortunately, the line was so long that they couldn't see the end of it. The teleportation point's space crystal kept flashing, and it seemed to be very busy. "What's going on?" Ron was shocked. "There weren't so many people when we came here." Kay tugged at Ron's sleeve and said, "That's a pornographic novel." "Brother N, look, they all seem to be mercenaries." Ron looked. Indeed, almost everyone in front of them was dressed as mercenaries. They were fully armed, and the knights were wearing battle armor. The warriors were sitting in a corner, gently wiping their weapons. The magicians were meditating, and more people were buying food and tent. "They seem to be going on a mission," Basara said. Ron sighed. "It seems like something happened. Let me find someone to ask." Ron looked around and reached out his hand, pulling a mercenary over. "What are you doing?" It was a young mercenary. It seemed like he sold everything in the 56-book vault, but the price was unusually high. Seeing that Ron really didn't understand, the young mercenary patiently explained, "Legend has it that when the ancient gods fought in other planes, the war was naturally extremely fierce. After some powerhouses died, their weapons and equipment might pass through space and arrive in another plane. The appearance of a sacred weapon would cause signs of spatial instability. So that's how it is? Ron was suddenly enlightened, but he still asked worriedly, Could this be true? Signs of spatial instability really appeared in another plane? Of course it's true. As far as I know, there are already powerhouses from the sacred domain rushing over. The young mercenary said without stopping. Oh right, there's also a powerhouse from the sacred domain who issued a sacred weapon mission. It's said that if anyone can get a sacred weapon and hand it over to him, they'll pay 100 million gold coins. So many mercenary groups have heard the news. 100 million gold coins. 100 million gold coins. The young mercenary's face revealed an extremely lustful expression. If only I'm lucky enough to get a sacred weapon. 100 million gold coins. When this number entered Ron's ears, he couldn't help but twitch his mouth. He thought that this powerhouse from the sacred domain was really generous to the extreme. He actually wanted to exchange 100 million gold coins for a sacred weapon. One had to know that sacred weapons in the mysterious store cost at least 20 black crystal coins. 100 million gold coins seemed like a lot, but it was completely incomparable to the value of a sacred weapon. After understanding the situation, Ron smiled and said, "Brother mercenary, thank you for telling me all this. Hee, I'll treat you to a drink when I have time." After finishing his sentence, he patted his shoulder and disappeared into the crowd with Becerra and Rainey. The young mercenary came back to his senses after a long time. He jumped up and shouted, "Ah! My consultation fee! I forgot to ask for my consultation fee." Chapter 368. The noisy teleportation point was packed with people. Most of them were humans. The large mercenaries had already left, leaving behind the small mercenary teams that weren't strong enough and didn't have enough people. They were expanding and recruiting, and some mercenaries also came to join. Firstly, there were more people, and secondly, it was safer. High-level thief looking for a holy artifact mission from another plane. The holy artifact mission is over quickly, we only need a mage to set off. Strong mercenary team, led by a master, plus a paladin or knight, will set off once we have enough people. The captain of the human mercenary team shouted, his eyes constantly looking for suitable targets in the crowd. When he saw someone who looked strong, he would go up and strike up a conversation. The teleportation point was very lively. At this time, an orc warrior came to the teleportation point. He was wearing heavy armor, his two eyes were like copper bells, and his face was fierce and sinister. "It's an orc." A sharp-eyed mercenary was the first to discover that orc warrior. Of course, that orc warrior's huge figure made it difficult to not be discovered. "Quick, go and team up with him." The mercenary team captains rushed up and tightly surrounded the orc warrior, all of them full of smiles. "Hello, Sir Orc, we are lacking a warrior. Do you have anyone interested in joining us?" A mercenary team captain said with a face full of smiles, his posture very humble. "We are the Flying Dragon mercenary team. We have rich battle experience, skilled skills, and tacit cooperation. Join us, there will be a lot of gold." As an orc warrior of a higher race, he was greeted with flattering smiles. They all wanted to pull this orc warrior into their team. In fact, most of the mercenary teams that claimed to be strong weren't that strong. Some of them only had the strength of a high or intermediate professional, and they had teamed up with an orc warrior. With him leading, their trip to another plane would be much easier. At least, no other mercenary teams would come looking for trouble. Humans and other pornographic novels' higher races had an innate fear, and as a higher race, professionals of the same rank wouldn't dare to speak in the 56 stack. "What do we do now?" Cilia asked. "There's no other way. We can only wait for them to arrive," Opavalus said after some thought. They still had some companions that hadn't arrived yet, and there were some matters that needed to be dealt with. "It's still not enough. At this time Rian, who had been silent all this while, spoke. Even with the 3 of them, there are only 7 of us. It's still not enough to enter the otherworld to do the mission. Celia and the other 2 thought about it. Wasn't that right? Even with the addition of the companions who hadn't arrived yet, there were only 7 people in total. They were still missing 1 person. Then what do we do? Opavila asked. Why don't we go back to the elven forest and find more people? It's too late. The space is unstable. There is no telling when the sacred artifact will appear. If we are any later, let alone obtain the sacred artifact, I fear that we won't even be able to see the shadow of the sacred artifact. Chapter 369. Then who should we team up with? Opavira asked. Grainweb, we only have 1 quota, so of course we'll team up with the strongest. Rian cast his gaze over the crowd, glancing at them one by one. Unfortunately, it only brought him disappointment. At a glance, almost all of them were intermediate and advanced professionals. Judging from their appearance and temperament, the possibility of them being strong was not high. Opavra pondered for a moment, then her eyes lit up and she said with a smile, "Oh right, Rian, didn't Slya learn a new nature magic called Hint from the Goddess of Nature? Let her use her natural perception to find a person and bring him back." This. Rian hesitated for a moment, then he turned his gaze to Slya. Is it okay? Slya, can you guarantee that the person you find will be strong? Slya patted her small chest. Of course it's okay, brother Rian, watch me. Saying so, she took out a short wooden staff from her space bag. This was her weapon as a nature mage. She straightened the staff, and her playful smile was replaced with a serious expression. Goddess of Nature, please guide me to find the strongest person here. After saying so, she loosened her hand and the staff emitted a soft green light, then it fell down with a thud. Pornographic novels. That strong person is in the west, Slya said with surprise and joy. She saw that the top of the fallen staff was pointing to the west. She picked up the staff, turned her head and smiled. Brother Rian, Sister Opavra, I'm going. Now that things had come to this, Rian could only believe in the goddess of nature. He nodded. Okay, be careful. Eki, you go with her and protect Slya. Although Eki looked silly, his combat power was extraordinarily strong. Especially when he transformed into a bear and used the roar skill, his combat power went up another level. Oh! Eki growled and his body changed. Not long after, he turned into a bear. TSK, I don't need his protection. Slya snorted disdainfully, and 1 person and 1 bear left the team. Looking at the back of the 2 people, Opavra said worriedly, Rian, is this okay? She won't bring back a good-for-nothing, will she? I don't care if he's useless. I'll just take care of him. Elian shrugged. But I've lost faith in nature magic from now on. Not this, not this. Celia was holding a short nature staff, and the light at the top of the nature staff continued to shine. But after searching for a long time, she still couldn't find anyone. The other mercenaries saw an elf and a druid of a higher race and sent them invitations to other planes, but they were all rejected one by one. I say, Slya, you have to call me Big Sister, Slya said without turning her head. Yes, Sister Celia, you haven't found it yet? Ike, who had transformed into a bear, asked helplessly. At this moment, Celia was riding on his back. Soon, what's the hurry? I have instructions from the goddess of nature, Celia said. At this time, she stretched out her hand and pointed. Go over there. At this time, the radiance of the nature staff stopped. It flickered continuously and pointed at a figure in front of him. It's him? Celia was a little surprised. The nature staff was pointing at a human wearing a black robe. His face was ordinary, and his figure was somewhat thin and weak. He was talking to 2 women beside him. There were 4 of them, 2 men and 2 women. Is it that human? Why does he look like he's not powerful at all? Celia said. Eki lowered his head and sniffed. He reminded her in a low voice, those 2 women are ordinary humans, but the little boy beside them is a book 56. He raised his head and asked, I'm a necromancer. What? When Celia heard this, she staggered and almost fell to the ground. Chapter 370. What's taking so long? The group of elves was still waiting. Opavera frowned and kept looking to the west. Did something happen to Celia and the rest? Probably not. Or maybe the invitation process didn't go well. Rian also frowned. If they were really strong, it wouldn't be so easy to invite them. A passionate photo feast grain net at this time. Rian paused and slowly turned to look, a smile on his face. They're back. Brother Opavera. A voice came from afar. A white elf girl greeted them with a smile, followed by 2 dark elves. Them? Opavera turned and immediately smiled. She waved her hand and said, Dietrich, come over here. The girl called Dietrich was an elementalist. She was good at summoning various elements to fight. She was a white elf and Rian's sister. Rian nodded and glanced at the 2 people behind her. He smiled and said, Firth, Aurora, you're finally here. Firth and Aurora standing behind Dietrich were both dark elves. One was a dark elf assassin and the other was a dark elf archer. Firth kept glancing at Aurora, his eyes full of love. Ever since Aurora returned from the human world, Firth, who was from the same village, had pursued her intensely. However, Aurora seemed to have no feelings and her expression was calm. Outside Firth's 56-book vault, everyone was stunned. Firth frowned and was the first to fire. Celia, are you out of your mind? I told you to find someone and you actually found a necromancer? Don't you know that necromancers are the trashiest profession? They can't even compare to ordinary humans. That's right, he doesn't have any fighting power. He's simply a burden. Dietrich glared at Ron. Any ordinary human would be more useful than him. But this is really the order of the goddess of nature. Slaya's face was full of grievances. Ever since she knew that Ron was a necromancer, she had been reading pornographic novels. Sherho was a little regretful, but he didn't expect everyone's reaction to be so intense. Hey, I'm talking to you. Firth said to Ron, You're Ron, right? As you can see, nobody wants you to join us. You can't help us at all. You'll only be a burden to us. If I were you, I would disappear now. When they heard that Ron was a necromancer, the situation immediately took a turn for the worse. Firth and Dietrich were the first to express their opposition, while Opavera and Rian remained silent, looking rather troubled. Celia bit her lips tightly, feeling extremely uncomfortable. She was the one who had found him, but she did not expect this result. She looked at Ron, her eyes full of sympathy. Ron sighed in his heart and thought, It seems that people's prejudice against necromancers won't disappear in a short time. Forget it, since they don't need me, I'll leave. Ron. Celia wanted to say something, but her throat seemed to be blocked by something and she couldn't speak. I understand. Ron smiled at her. Thank you for the moon's spring water. Looking at the crowd, Ron bowed slightly. Since my arrival has dissatisfied everyone, then everyone, Ron will take his leave. Ron didn't want to say anything more. He turned around and strode away. He didn't want to go to another plane anyway, so it was time to leave. Stop. Go to Grainweb to see the first commercial-free episode. Chapter 371. Ron turned around calmly, only to find that it was Aurora, who had the same name as his lover. He was slightly stunned and then his eyes turned cold. Is there anything else? Aurora turned to look at Elian and said calmly, Elian, I don't think we should judge his strength so arbitrarily. We should at least give him a chance to prove himself. Prove what? Dietrich frowned. Everyone knows that necromancers are a trashy profession. Aurora, don't be fooled by that name. Necromancers are not magicians. The difference between them is like heaven and earth. Aurora certainly knew about Ron's strength. After not seeing him for a while, she felt that Ron's strength had skyrocketed again. Thinking back, he was already very powerful. Aurora did not know how powerful he was now, but she knew that after a series of events, his strength was definitely not below hers. Novel-ranking pornographic novels, Grain Web, yes, Aurora, do you know what it means for him to join us? He can't help us with anything, and we have to take care of him. According to the rules of the mercenary team, we have to give him a share of all our income. Do you think we need to do that? If we really want to form a team, who can't? Firth was also a little surprised. Why would Aurora, who was usually quiet, take the initiative to speak up for a necromancer? Aurora took a deep breath and said to Elian, I still think that we should give him a chance. I believe that the goddess of nature's instructions will not lie. That's right, that's right. He really is the person that the goddess of nature instructed us to look for. Celia immediately agreed, as if she had finally found her savior. When everyone was doubting her, only Aurora stood firmly by her side. She was filled with gratitude towards Aurora. At the mention of the goddess of nature, Elian had no choice but to express his stance. He pondered for a moment. All right, we can bring you to another dimension and give you a chance to prove yourself. But if you're really just a good-for-nothing, you'll have to disappear by then. Ron was furious when he heard this. According to his character, he should have rejected this. Damn it, now you want me to join, but I don't want to join. But when he came into contact with Ceria's clear eyes, Ron compromised. His eyes were filled with pleading. Forcibly suppressing the indescribable humiliation, Ron nodded faintly. All right. Only then did Slaya's heart relax. Aurora looked away with a complicated expression. She knew that she still had not forgotten that person in her heart. Then let's go. Elian glanced at Ron and turned to walk towards the teleportation point. The others hurriedly followed. Ron also hesitated for a moment and quickly followed. A small hand gently tugged at the corner of his clothes. Ron turned around and saw that it was Slaya. She said softly, Ron, thank you. I have always had confidence in you. After saying that, she quickly ran away. Looking at Slaya's back, Ron could not help but feel warm in his heart. A bright light flashed, and Ron only felt his vision turn black. When his eyes adjusted, he had already arrived at another dimension. This was a simple camp. Many merchants had set up tents and were shouting loudly. Buying the essence cores of exotic beasts, furs, large quantities, price negotiable. Buying all kinds of exotic beast materials, fair price, fast. The merchants here were holding crystal cards in their hands, constantly waving them around. Behind them, the tents were piled high with dimensional bags, all of which were exotic beast materials. Several mercenaries were trading here. Although these merchants did not seem very powerful, behind them stood quite a few master-level experts. If anyone had any ill intentions, they probably wouldn't be able to return to the Noah continent alive. Upon seeing Ron's squad, the merchants' eyes lit up. With a whoosh, they immediately surrounded them. Respected elves, we are the Gold Mining Company. We hope that when you return, you will choose us. We are from the Dawson conglomerate. Elves, if you want to sell exotic beast materials, you have to come to us. We guarantee our credibility. Although they hadn't set off yet, the elven squad had already become a hot commodity in the eyes of these merchants. Towards the squad that they favored, they would establish good relations with them and get familiar with them. They would even give them food and water. From this, one could see that these merchants knew how to do business. However, they felt that it was very strange for a human like Ron to be standing in their squad. In private, they began to discuss amongst themselves. What's going on with this human? How did he manage to sneak into the elven squad? Ah, he seems to be a necromancer, no way. Aren't elves supposed to be extremely noble and look down on other races? Why would they let a human join them? And who's wrong? And a necromancer at that. Ron turned a deaf ear to these words. The world's misunderstandings towards necromancy were too deep. Elian politely declined the merchant's offers of food and water, then led everyone out of the crude camp. The dark sky, the blood-red sun. The entire plain was filled with a strange, devilish energy. In the sky, lightning flashed chaotically, and the earth trembled slightly. It was as though the end of the world had arrived. Despite this place was still a rare treasure trove. Countless exotic beasts lived here, and mercenaries who came here to adventure, as long as they didn't die, would be able to make a fortune. Once again stepping onto the soil of the other plane, Ron couldn't help but sigh. The scene of him and his fellow students adventuring together was still fresh in his mind. Aurora was also quietly looking at the sky. No one knew what she was thinking. Firth was talking to her, but she acted as though she didn't hear anything. At this time, Elian took out a map from his pocket and called out, "Everyone, come here for a moment." Everyone gathered around. Elian spread the map on the ground and pointed at a place. According to the map of the Mercenary Union, the location of the spatial instability is about here, about 300 kilometers away from us. There were countless exotic beasts along the way. It was already very difficult for us to get to that location. I'm afraid it will take us many days. As for the reward for the mission, Elian glanced at Ron, paused, and said, "I think it's better to talk about this in advance. All the treasures obtained from the adventure will be divided equally. But if we obtain a sacred weapon, we will hand it over to the Great Elder. If there are people who make a special contribution, the Great Elder will give other rewards. Is there any problem?" These words were naturally directed at Ron. Everyone here was an elf, and he was the only human. Ron didn't come for the sacred weapon, and he never expected to be able to obtain one. He nodded lightly and said, "No problem." "Very good." Elian smiled and put away the map. "Let's go." "Ah, right, Ron, what position will you be in?" The so-called position referred to the role of each member, such as the knight's meat shield, the mage's damage output, the thief's reconnaissance, the archer's long-range support, the priest's healing, and so on. Every role cooperated to form a powerful mercenary team. Position? Ron pondered for a moment, raised his head and said lightly, "Anywhere." "Anywhere?" Not only Elian, but all the elves were shocked, except for Aurora. "You mean, you can be in any position?" Dietrich's eyes were filled with disbelief. "Are you bragging? You can be in all positions by yourself?" Opavila also didn't believe it. Elian frowned. "Ron, now is not the time to joke." Ron smiled calmly. "I don't have the habit of joking. Well then, since you're so good, how about you be in my position?" Firth interrupted, and Aurora spoke up for him. Firth was already very unhappy. "I'm an assassin, and I usually do reconnaissance work. If there's danger, I'll warn in advance and remind everyone to be ready for battle. How about it? Can you do it?" He looked at Ron, his eyes full of provocation. Everyone's eyes swished to Ron. If Ron didn't agree, then he was bragging. Ron didn't decline, nodded and said lightly, "Okay, let's go." After saying that, he walked in front alone. The elves looked at each other and quickly followed. After walking for a few miles, no one spoke. Ron walked quietly in front, but the elves gathered in a group behind and discussed in private. Deidre said, "Do you think he's bragging? He said he's going to attack your position, but I don't see him going forward to scout." "That's right." Firth looked at Ron's back and said bitterly, I think he's most likely a liar, Sliya said. No way, I think he's very confident. Ike shook his head and said, I only know that until now I haven't encountered any trouble. Aurora didn't speak, but her pair of sharp eyes stared at the black shadows flying around in the sky, and a smile appeared on her face. This guy is still the same, so cool that he doesn't explain. I really don't know when those crows were released. At this time, Ron's footsteps suddenly stopped and he said in a deep voice, Be careful, there are 8 rank 6 mad mastiffs in front, and they're rushing in our direction. What? Everyone was slightly stunned, and some couldn't believe it. Elian frowned and asked, How did you know? Ron looked to the east and said slowly, They're coming. Yes, I sensed it. I sensed it too. Sliya and Ike, who had nature's perception, said. At this time, the huge roars of rank 6 mad mastiffs came from the distance. These crazy exotic beasts attacked anyone they saw. Everyone, get ready for battle. Elian stretched out his hand and took out a long magic staff from his spatial bag, and ordered at the same time. Shwa, shwa, shwa. Everyone unsheathed their weapons. Opavala unsheathed her longsword, Dietrich unsheathed her staff, and Aurora unsheathed her longbow. Ike let out a low roar and transformed into his power form, a bear. At this time, 8 huge exotic beasts appeared on the distant horizon. The rank 6 mad mastiffs were about 2 meters long, and their bodies weighed more than 200 kilograms. Their well-developed muscles bulged, and they opened their mouths to reveal their white teeth. Elian's heart shook. They really are rank 6 mad mastiffs, and there are 8 of them. He looked at Ron's back in disbelief. Impossible, he actually got them all right. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.